Good evening. It being on or after 7 o'clock, I'm going to open up the February 19th, 2015 meeting of the Georgetown Conservation Commission. On the agenda this evening, we do have some hearings. Some of them have been either canceled or continued, and we do have some business to discuss, so we will start off with the business issues. And Steve, we have an enforcement issue to start off with on the agenda.
So, if we can hold off on the one industrial way,
Okay.
the applicant would like to be in for that discussion.
And
I told him.
do we have an ETA or?
I didn't know about all the continuations and withdrawals, so I said after 8 o'clock.
Okay.
So after our last hearing. I have been talking to the Carlton Way folks.
Okay, that's fine. So it's, since it's after 7, we can open the TIDS hearings.
Okay.
And motion to have them withdrawn. It being on or after 7 o'clock, I'm going to open up TIDS Junkyard, GCC 2007-11, and TIDS Junkyard, GCC 2007-12, and -11 is the complete site remediation under Chapter 21E, followed by construction of a 16-unit senior family housing development, associated grading, roadway, septics, utilities, stormwater, etc. And the second hearing -12 is a revisions of the plan to construct 16-unit senior family housing and associated grading, roadway, septic, and stormwater structures, etc. And I understand we have a request, finally, from the applicant to withdraw without prejudice.
Correct.
And these hearings have been going on since, I believe, 2000 was the official start of the process for the NOI on the junkyard remediation and cleanup. And I do remember that very clearly, 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And is there any discussion?
At this point, the only thing I just want to remind the commission is that there's still an existing enforcement order
And
that's out there.
right, and we're not talking about closing the EO. We're talking about having the applicant withdraw the 2 NOIs that have been outstanding. We have really been operating under the enforcement order literally since the first order of conditions was issued 15 years ago, because there was some serious violations at that time, right from the start of the process. So we issued an EO at that time back in 2000. And again, all the activities, the cleanup, the sampling, everything that's really occurred has been under that EO.
And they still have fines that they've accumulated in that time. Do we know how high that fine amount has gone?
We've had fines, we've withdrawn the fines, there've been fines, we've actually collected fines over the years. So I'm not sure, and that's really something I think, Steve, you need to kind of figure out.
It's also kind of interpretation, because, for example, they were supposed to, all sampling was supposed to be done with the town representative on site for every sampling. I don't think they've done that for 5 years. We've discussed it, we talked about it, and we said, well, we'll kind of accept them, but don't do it again. And they went and did it again. If you really want to add up stuff, there's a lot of interpretation involved in it, and I can do a review of it and give you kind of a good estimate.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd like to just do an assessment of what the situation is before we, ultimately close the EO, just so we know what we have. And we may not want, we may choose to, forgive the fines. And,
Yep.
we've got the cleanup done, and that
Right.
was one of the big main focuses of the whole NOI, to clean up a contaminated site that was in our, Zone 2 drinking water area, and, and clean up an environmental hazard.
Yeah.
The goal.
So, last time, we were discussing whether we were going to keep that EO open with the fines hanging over them. But really, that was to make sure that the cleanup was completed, and
Right.
we're confident, we've accepted.
Right, we've accepted this
that
last
they're-
sampling, and, the last round of sampling really wasn't for the cleanup, it was for the land that the applicant was gonna donate to the town for
Right.
conservation purposes. And before we accepted said land, we wanted to make sure it was clean. We never want to accept contaminated land. Under federal regulations, you essentially become a PRP, potentially responsible party, and assume some responsibility for any future cleanup if you own the land. And we don't want to accept land that's contaminated.
Right. So we feel that the cleanup of the actual site has been completed according to the sampling that they conducted. And we're happy with the proof that they've submitted that the land they're donating is clean. So in reflection after that meeting, I wondered whether we really needed to keep those fines hanging over them, because the next step for them is an NOI to build.
Right. And right, I mean, and we've had this discussion, we've wanted them to withdraw for a while, only because there's no way this current commission can vote on that
Right.
NOI anyway, because of the Mullen Rule, et cetera. There's been different commissioners over a 15-year period, there's no way we can vote, so we've only been operating legally under an EO.
Can you explain when they're withdrawing now? What actually does that mean? They're
Just basically, in layman's terms, they're taking their NOI back, they're pulling their application back.
their application to build this new
And the cleanup
system.
and the build.
So they'll resubmit. The problem is
Oh.
that Carl knows more about the site than I do. Rachel has no clue.
Right.
How
And
could
we
you vote
can't
on it?
vote. We can't vote on something
Correct.
we haven't been involved
So
in.
there's
right?
no longer enough commissioners to vote on this legally.
Okay.
So either they have to withdraw or we have to deny it because we can't vote on it.
Okay.
And it's kind of, makes
So
sense
they
for this.
withdraw and then they come back.
So in essence, we could deny it and it really wouldn't make any difference because we could deny it, or it's better for them in a sense if they withdraw than us denying it. As,
And it's less paperwork for
in
me.
a denial that they can only resubmit if there's significant changes, or they have to wait 3 years.
Laura, are you leaning towards voting to remove the EO, just based on
I
your
mean,
2 cents since you
Just
got in
wondering
before?
if
Like, where are you
we
going with
have
that?
any concerns that
Why to
is
leave it on?
relevant. Like, now we're just waiting for them to decide to build.
Yeah.
Well-
We're happy that they've cleaned it up, and now it's really up to them if they're going to build or not. We don't have an
In a
enforcement
sense, it-
situation of that.
In a sense, it doesn't detract or hurt either way if we, and there's really no harm in leaving it on until they actually file the NOI. Because there are two separate legal mechanisms that are in play. So they can file, actually we have to, before they can file the new NOI, we actually have to lift the EO. Because I don't think you can file an NOI on an existing EO.
I think you can. One industrial way that we're hearing later, right? It's in an EO stage right now, and eventually I'm hoping they'll file a notice of intent. So I believe you can. I think the only reason I can think of to leave the EO in place is the history of the property and the lack of compliance and the issues we've had. Again, you can always remove the EO and then put one on it when there's an issue, but you won't have as many years of fining to hold over their head, so to say. So again, it doesn't matter, and you can make arguments for both ways.
And do we have to renew it? Do we have to vote to renew it every now and then, or it
Nope.
just stays in
rides-
place?
just keeps
Unless the
riding.
commission would write the EO in a way that says it expires in a year or two, whatever,
Right.
it's really.
Or
I
if
mean,
we need to amend it in some way. I remember doing that in the past.
I mean, we've amended that EO probably 15 times,
Right.
which is why when you say, figure out how much the fines would be, it's a really hard process because each time you write a new one, you have to kind of restart the
And,
timeline.
right, there may not be there may not be a clear answer to that question, and
Yeah.
that's okay
Yeah.
too, but, we ought to take a look at it just to,
Yep, I agree.
just figure out where we are.
So at some point, you all need to vote to accept the withdrawal, just so we can move on at some point.
So, yeah, I will entertain a motion to accept the withdrawal without prejudice for GCC 2011 and a separate one for GCC 2007-12.
Second the
Somebody
motion.
has to make the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to accept the request to withdraw without prejudice the Tids Junkyard 2 NOIs. GCC 2007-11, which is DEP 1610666, such an appropriate number. And also Tids Junkyard GCC 2007-12, which is DEP 1610661.
Second the
There's a
motion.
motion and it's been a second to accept the withdrawal for both TID's junkyard hearings, GCC 2007-11 and GCC 2007-12. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All abstaining. Motion carries.
That's exciting.
It's actually a milestone.
Well, it's,
It is a
definitely-
milestone.
Environmentally, it's a
Definitely a
win.
milestone.
Terrific.
It's probably one of the longest NOIs that's existed in this community. And it's really taken a long time to get that cleanup to occur. Finally there.
That's terrific that that has actually been completed right there next to our water department. That's really important. That was great.
Okay, and we had a new notice of intent for Pond Street, and we've been requested to continue that.
Yep.
And that's actually not new, we actually
It's
opened
actually
that.
not new, yeah. We
This
opened
is
it last week.
from last meeting, so it's a continuation, and essentially we need to open this and then continue it. It being on or after 7:15, I'm going to open NOI for 211 Pond Street, GCC 2014-24. It's residents under local jurisdiction enforcement order. Permit unapproved gravel parking, remove unapproved gravel parking area within 55 feet of a BBW and replace with native grasses, construction fence to delineate the buffer. And the applicant has requested a continuance.
Correct.
And do we have a date and time for that?
March 19th. Started off at 7 o'clock.
And I will entertain a motion to continue to March 19th at 7 PM.
Mr. Chairman, I'll like to make a motion to continue 211 Pond Street, GCC 2014-24, DEP 1610796, to our next meeting, March 19th at 7 o'clock.
Second the motion.
There's a motion, and it's been seconded to continue the NOI for 211 Pond Street to March 19th at 7 o'clock. Any further discussion? And you're waiting to receive you've had some conversations with the applicant's consultant, and
Engineer was in last week and just kind of doodled up some
but he
options.
hasn't actually sent you anything formal yet. So okay,
He had a computer crash or something like that and lost a previous draft, so,
okay.
No, sad.
yeah, it was not good.
Well, hopefully by the next hearing, you'll have something. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, all abstaining. Motion carries. And can't open quite the next hearing yet because it's not 7:30 yet. So do we have any business that we can accomplish in the next 4 minutes?
Bills?
Bills, those things.
$124 for power for Camp Dennison.
Electric bill,
Correct.
okay?
There was some snow removal off the roofs. They had some issues with the roofs, bowing under all the snow. $1,000 to clear the snow off of the buildings.
On the main lodge.
Yeah. Some tree work, Steve's tree, there was a tree that had been damaged that was leaning over the lodge, $800 for that removal. Water bill for $360. And just a heads up on this one, this is the previous bill was over $3,000.
Water bill?
And what happened is there's a leak before that they didn't detect because we weren't reading it quarterly. So they picked it up after pretty much a year of leaking. So, I talked to Lou in the water department, and what we're gonna do is they're switching it to be read quarterly, and we're gonna install another meter. So the meter right now is at the road. So it has, a 1,000-foot run before it gets to the
So
lodge.
let me ask the question, has the leak been fixed?
It has been fixed, yeah. So we're gonna have another meter installed at the lodge to kind of have a second, so the camp manager can check on it once in a while. The other thing I like about that is they can check on it before some of these bigger events. So we'll have a workshop in the woods type
Will
group
be
down
good-
there for a
good
month,
data.
for 3 or
Would
4
be-
days.
yeah.
We can determine, because we're always saying, well, how much water is this group using, how much of this? It's just one more piece of data that we can collect from that. So the water department did abate almost $3,000 worth of that bill
They did.
because it was a leak. Honestly, I think it was scheduled to be done quarterly, but they weren't doing it. So again, it should have been caught a lot earlier. Again, it's a town property. They abated it, but pretty much said, we need to pay attention to these things and, be responsible on how much water we use on it. Some of these events, they do use a lot of water.
So we, just to reiterate, we still need to install another water meter. down
Correct.
there. Closer
They have-
to the lodge.
They're gonna actually pretty much do it where the water comes into the building so that the person can be in the basement and just look at the meter.
Yeah.
So I just need a motion to pay bills.
I'll entertain a motion to pay the bills as read by Steve.
I'll make a motion to pay the bills as read by Steve.
Second.
We have a motion, and it's been seconded to pay the bills as read by Steve. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All
So-
opposed? All abstaining?
This is kind of the spot to sign. Typically, you leave the top one for the chair. Just as kind of a courtesy.
And let's see, looks to be 7:30 by my watch and the clock on the wall. And it being after 7:30, I'm going to open this is a new one? New
This
in-
is also a continuation. There's just-
Continuation NOI for 175 Central Street, septic
That's
system
right.
replacement and repair of existing building. Okay, yes, all right, I'm familiar with this one now.
This is the, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just, since it's open, we are gonna continue this, and we've been asked by the applicant, any update from the applicant at this point?
No, at the last meeting, there was a handful of different things discussed, replacing that culvert with a more appropriately sized culvert, replacing the septic system. It was honestly a pretty hefty list of things, and I think they just needed some time to, kind of figure out if it's fiscally viable and kind of engineering wise. When you change culvert sizes, it's kind of a big deal, because changing it might relieve issues upstream, but create more flooding downstream. So when you change culvert sizes, it's actually a very big deal. You need to show and prove that it's not gonna impact people downflow.
Oh, absolutely, that's, and the angle's gotta be, you can't change the angles of the culverts to
Discharging
cause,
of,
additional water discharge.
That being said, there are some really big flooding issues there,
Mm.
and, we really shouldn't discuss in too much detail tonight. I just wanna give you an overview, but, the flooding issues definitely needs to be a big part of our discussion. So we're just looking to
Okay.
continue that.
So we
this
wanna do
spring
March
should be interesting round
19th
there.
sometime, March 19th, is that adequate
Yep.
with the applicant?
It is to 7:15, if you would not mind.
I'll entertain a motion to continue to March 15th, 19th, thank you for the correction.
Mr. Chairman, I would love to make a motion to continue 175 Central Street, GCC 2014-25, DEP 1610797 to March 19th at 7:15.
I second the motion.
We have a motion, it's been seconded to continue the notice of intent for 175 Central Street to March 19th at 7:15. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all opposed, all abstaining. Thank you, motion carries.
Camp Dennison, since we have a few minutes for a discussion item, the camp manager down at Camp Dennison has put in a request to be reappointed, so we have a license agreement. And I believe I asked him to come in to discuss this, and I didn't hear back from him. Typically, signing it kind of makes what he's doing right now legitimate and legal.
Right, the discussion is more just a meet and greet to, because we don't have a lot of FaceTime, and, it's more of a, what can we do for you, and
Yep.
just to have the camp manager meet the commissioners, et cetera, and see if there's anything that we can do to assist.
I think he's doing a wonderful job, a wonderful job. That camp is beautifully well-run. I would say I would love to reappoint him this evening and ask him to come in another time, because it would be really nice to have a conversation with him and thank him.
So I'll take that as a motion.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to reappoint Don Anderson to the position of camp manager at Camp Dennison.
I second the motion.
We have a motion, and it's been seconded to reappoint Don Anderson as manager at Camp Dennison. Is there any further discussion? Now, is that a term for a year?
It's a year.
Yeah, because
It's
that's
actually,
norm.
we try to keep them in July, so this one's for a year and a little bit more. But typically, we try to just do a year on July. So we gave him a year plus, just so you wouldn't
Get
have
him
to
back.
reappoint him in 2
Yeah, I
months.
think we want to get him back on cycle, and that's the,
I mean, he hasn't been appointed in 3 or 4 years.
Right.
So this is just getting him back on cycle as he should. I mean, it's protecting him as much as the town. We shouldn't have gone this far back on it.
well, yeah, I've been trying to get that to happen for a while.
I know.
I'll call the question. Is any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed or abstaining? Unanimous, motion carries.
I have one other, since we have about 10 minutes. I met with the Carlton Way, so the commission issued an enforcement order on Carlton Way the last meeting, and Lenny came in
Right.
from Mira to discuss what was going on. I did send around the memo that they sent out today or yesterday, I forget when. A lot of the enforcement order was just kind of getting control of the site so that we could evaluate what's going on. After kind of looking at some of the documentation they had and some of the paperwork and the discussion, I think I can confidently say that there was no direct wetland impact or wetland fill that had occurred.
Mm-hmm.
And given the time of the year, we're kind of in holding pattern. So we're gonna wait till the spring where we can actually get on the ground and really delineate where the wetland is.
Yeah, I certainly will agree. It would be a challenge in any respect to
Yeah.
try and do any
Uh,
real corrective action.
And so we just kind of let the enforcement order
Right
ride
at
till the
this time.
spring. You know, that being said, if there is wetland filling, we'll have to evaluate it come spring and figure what to do. I'm less honestly concerned about the fill activity related to the wetlands, because it's all a good distance away from the wetlands.
Mm-hmm.
The wetland along the road, they were supposed to do some road improvements that never happened. When I went out there to check out the site originally, my truck almost got stuck in one of the puddles. Because when you have, 100 trucks driving down a road that's not really been improved, it gets pretty soupy. So when I was driving down the road, it was honestly very hard to tell where the wetland stopped and where, began as far as the road was concerned. So as far as the actual soil fill, I don't believe it was put in the wetlands, but the access was really mucked up. And again, we can't tell anything right now. The site's pretty much shut down for the season. We'll evaluate in the spring. They'll file a notice of intent. Their intention is to improve the roadway enough to be able to get out there, move any soil that's in the buffer, and level it out. So their intention, to give you a quick history, this site, they had an order of conditions to build a office building out there 10 plus years ago.
Yeah, I remember it. I was on
Yeah, I
the
think
commission
you were on the commission, yeah. They stumped it, they cleared it, stumped it, took all the topsoil, screened it, and actually took this topsoil off-site, and then have done nothing since. So when they had some extra soil from another project, they thought, well, we'll bring it on this site, bring it up to the grade, the construction grade, so they can make it more marketable to sell it. They didn't realize that the order of conditions had expired. So they were pretty much, everything that they're doing is really in line with the original order of conditions, but it had expired. So their intent is to improve the roadway so they can get in there, level out all the soil, so it kind of looks nicer, so they can market it for potential development. No matter what they do out there, you're gonna have to file a notice of intent, because the access to get out to it is pretty close to the wetlands. So
Mhm.
they're gonna put in a temporary roadway just to allow them, or improve the roadway enough to get equipment out there to level this thing out, and then get out, and that's all the notice of intent would really be for. It's not for any development or big picture stuff. So given that there's no real direct wetland impact, and the fact that they'll file a notice of intent in the spring, I'm actually gonna take it off the agenda till the spring, just to know that it's out there.
So they were gonna build an office building and then they decided not to.
Yep, so Mira has some property over near Marina Way. Their intent was to move their whole office building over there, and they decided not to. They've actually made, a huge improvements to the existing site. So I think they just expanded where they are now on Marina Way, and they decided not to move forward on this project.
They made an improvement on,
The existing office
Yeah,
building.
Where
they
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 are.
expanded it. Actually, they were in
Yeah.
a year and a half ago or so.
Yeah, it was before the commission.
Okay, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, there's nothing really you can do at this point. You can't even figure out what you have for resources out there, given the current weather conditions, so. As I said, this was the driver many years ago for the commission not to try and do the site walks when you have 3 feet of snow on the ground, and you'd have someone digging down saying, "Oh, I think this is a blueberry twig." It just, you really can't tell what's going on in many cases, so. We just felt in many cases it would be best to, postpone some of these things. And let's see, since we have a couple minutes, I did want to remind everyone that, to take a look at the open space, and rec plan. And, you should have all received that. And you should read it and provide your comments, because, this is your opportunity. I mean, you don't necessarily want to just rubber stamp it. If you want to see something modified or changed or added, that's, what we should do.
When are they coming in, or when are we?
I don't think there's a date been set at this point, really.
There's no-
They're just
there's-
looking for feedback and comments from us, and, we have to sign off on this and approve it. It's not going anywhere till we do that.
Okay.
But I really would like commissioners to give their input, not just to, rubber stamp it and take a look at it. I mean, it's our open space plan, open space and rec plan, and we play a big part in that, so, if we wanna see some additional things in there, that's the time to make the comments.
Okay.
And we have to have it in place so we can apply for state grants to buy land, et
Correct.
cetera. So that's why it's important that we actually get it done.
And at the last meeting, we were talking a lot about different things that we wanted to see, and I haven't read it yet. I know I got it, but it'd be nice if some of that was in there about trees and things like that, so.
And I think that the best place for the tree protection is a separate tree bylaw, which we did talk about we can do. You can obviously include it in there, because it's kind of a big picture, what would you like to see happen in the town, but as far as the actual tool to do that. would be
I mean,
the bylaw.
some of what's in that is required by the state. I mean, it has to have certain boilerplate information in that thing of categorizing what we have for resources in the town now, defining everything and future goals, et cetera. But, there are really where we can input things and what we would like to see. I mean, what are our goals for the future? What are our concerns for open space? That's the document.
It's got 5 minutes till the next hearing, and
And that's why it's called the Open Space and Recreation Plan, because it's not just passive recreation land, it's also active recreation land. So passive is just hiking, snowshoeing, that sort of thing, whereas active is, kids' sports fields and playgrounds and that sort of thing. So in the past, the emphasis has always been on passive, acquisition of passive open space land. And now, the emphasis in this one is really much more on active recreation land. So that's a bit, that's a big change that has occurred in this one.
and Laura has worked on the open space plan a lot
Oh.
with that group, so she's probably the most knowledgeable out
Not
of
this one so much, the last one.
Yeah, but you have
Yeah.
experience with them,
Mm-hmm,
so
mm-hmm.
really good to get a read from it.
In some of the towns, they're starting to let some of the town land be used for things like town woodlots or town orchards or town grazing lots and things like that. Is there anything in there about that?
I don't think there is, and remember that interesting conversation we had with the forestry man about foresting our woodland?
To create potential lumber for the town or improve the stands
Well,
or.
if that's, I mean,
Exactly.
yeah, if it's not done correctly, you can end up with a very
With a mess,
negative
yeah.
situation. And in fact,
Absolutely.
the state itself has ended up with egg on its face on some of these.
But
types
Haverhill's
of
been
projects.
doing that. I walk around Winnie Kinney, that lake, Canosa Lake, and they had huge groves of hemlock that were getting hit by that woolly adelid. And they did a selective harvest out there this past winter, massive, probably 100 acres. But it looks awesome. It's growing back, and
Right.
they got rid of a lot of trees that probably would have been a fire hazard or other issues. Like, there's a way of doing it that
Yeah,
makes
as
the
you
land
said,
better.
if it's done, if selective harvesting is done correctly, but if you just let someone go in with a
You're
chainsaw
right.
and
Yeah, no, this was a very professional operation. If we did it, I would try to go with I mean, they actually put silt fence up along the resources and
Right.
did it all in the winter. It was a very, very professional
What was the name of
operation.
that forester that?
Can't remember.
He was really good.
Yeah.
I went out thinking, well, he won't have anything that I don't already know, and he did. He
Yeah.
did a lot of really interesting things,
Mhm.
and we got to see 5-year, 10-year. I think the oldest one was like 20.
17, I think it was,
Almost
something
20
near
years,
20, yeah.
and it was really impressive, the improvement to the forest and the health of the ground layer and
Mm-hmm.
But, many
Stands of
times
trees.
when you see clear cut areas and then you just have scrub growing and then you just have, brush and it just comes
Yeah,
back very
yeah.
bad.
well, I don't think there was anything clear cut. Did you go out to that? I
I,
think we were.
I,
Yeah.
I
No,
don't know
it
if
was
I-
just you and
I
me
think
running
the
through the
key-
woods.
Yeah, I think the key with the way they do is in the winter, so you don't damage the soil. Once you disturb the soil, a lot of the invasives take root first, and
Right.
some of that stuff. If you don't disturb the
Actually,
soil, it's kind of
His recommendation was to do it in the summer because then you have
Right.
more seeds that fall,
Hmm.
which provides a much, much greater percentage of regeneration, just natural regeneration.
And also, there was a lot of wetland there, so it
Mhm.
was a lot drier in the summer.
That's right as well. Mhm.
interesting. Cool. Someone
It
can
was
look
really
into.
interesting, and the quality, as you said, the quality of the forest out there, it was beautiful and healthy, and it really made me think that and his point was a well managed forest is really a healthy, beautiful place. I was sold.
Yeah.
Start cutting.
What?
Nothing. Carl, we're all set to move on to the next case. We're all set with this discussion.
Okay. It being on or after 7:45, I'm going to reopen a notice of intent for 304 Central Street, GCC 2014-26. That's the construction of a 38 by 58-foot barn. If I could have the applicant and/or consultant, and if you could identify yourself for the record, please.
Bill Manuel from Wetlands and Land Management.
Attorney Brian Cassidy representing the owner James Moskin. And Mr. Moskin was gonna try to make it tonight, he had another commitment, so he may pop in or he may not get here, and I apologize on his behalf.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, one thing as I look around the room, I know we had two other members, I believe we had two other members at the last hearing. And I believe we have a new member tonight.
Correct. So you have
Correct.
3 that are active and could vote, 1 that cannot,
Right.
the other 2 are not here.
Yeah, and I always am concerned when we start a hearing with 2 other people and don't have enough, and I'm wondering if perhaps we should continue till we have an opportunity to have a full panel.
It's your choice.
So I'll be honest with you, you run the risk of 2 different people not being able to make it for the next meeting. But
I
again,
understand.
You know the game.
Yeah, I understand, hey, I was a city solicitor for 15 years, so I understand how it works. But I think it makes more sense if we have the full panel present, given the voting requirements we need to have a decision one way or the other.
And that way, John would have only missed one actual
Right, and
hearing,
right,
so
and
he could
can
catch
make
up with
that up. He
that
can
on
read up on the
video.
minutes on that, et cetera.
Okay, so
Sign
then
in.
he would be able to vote too, so that would be good.
I mean, that's fine. I mean, it's your, it's your choice if you would like to do that. I have no objection to doing that.
I'll check who was here, because we're missing 3 tonight. And I believe they were all here the last.
Nick and Andrew were both here last
This is the
last
gentleman that went on the
week.
site visit
Mhm.
with you.
Yeah.
is here,
That's
yeah,
right, yeah,
And then John would only have missed 1.
yeah.
And the
Mhm.
minutes are not done yet, but he can watch the video online.
I think that's what he needs to do.
Okay. I will let him know that he needs to watch them.
Yeah.
Even if he can't, if we're missing 1, we'll have,
Right.
we'll have 6, so.
Yeah,
Do we
I
have-
don't like to delay it, but I think it makes more sense.
Well, yeah, I don't want to, go down the path and have a situation where nobody can vote.
Right, exactly.
That doesn't make sense
Exactly.
for anyone's perspective.
So,
Does that mean that Rachel could watch the minutes from,
I gotta talk to town
but
council
you
because
weren't
she wasn't a
appointed.
commissioner yet. But
Right.
she was here. She was here for the entire
oh,
meeting,
that's right.
looking to
Yeah,
get on the
that
commission.
would definitely be a town council type question, because I don't know
Okay.
if if you were sitting as just a citizen, whether you could that would be acceptable as peering.
But you can also watch it on, like John's gonna watch it on TV.
Yeah.
You could still watch it on TV, because at the time you might not have been listening to it in the same way.
Mm.
So I'll check to make
Yeah,
sure, 'cause I
that's-
don't know if you have to be a standing commissioner for that
Yeah,
rule to apply.
that's certainly something I don't know about the Mullen Rule, I don't know.
Okay, I'll find out.
Don't know.
So the next meeting is at the 19th of March?
19th, correct.
All right, so we need to continue to that date.
Okay,
Okay, is anything-
Mr.
okay.
Chairman,
I'll entertain a motion to continue 304 Central Street to March 19th at maybe
7:30?
30.
Mr. Chairman, I propose a motion to continue I've got my place value all messed up this evening. It's not 3004, it's 304 Central Street, GCC 2014-26, DEP 1610798 March 19th at 7:30.
Second the
We have a
motion?
motion that's been seconded to continue the notice of intent for 304 Central Street to March 19th at 7:30 PM. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All abstained?
Thank you.
Sorry to drag you out. Thank
That's
you
all
for
right.
coming.
That's-
I'm sure.
Everybody will get home earlier this way.
Yeah, it goes with the weather, I guess, you know.
And
Yeah,
it's moving up on the
truly.
agenda too, so.
So far, nothing has collapsed. I hope.
The next hearing is at 8 o'clock, 10 minutes, and I'll be honest, I've already gone through all of my stall tactics.
We'll take a short recess.
Okay.
Actually, it might be good. That cup of coffee is,
Well,
How's that work? Is it just look like it's gonna collapse?
sorry you had to come.
Um,
I said, no, so far, so good.
Information.
Good evening again. You're back with the Georgetown Conservation Commission, and we're gonna start off with another hearing, the notice of intent for 11 Ordway Street, GCC 2014-27. That's a septic system upgrade and grading, if I could have the applicant and a consultant, if they're available.
They're not, at the last meeting, it was just discussed, they were waiting on
Okay.
approval from the DEP and get comments from them. The
And-
commission at the time had no concerns or questions, it was just
Right,
waiting on the
okay.
DEP.
Yeah,
So this isn't a new one either?
Correct, no.
no.
The last one is new, this one is not. I just forgot to change
Yes,
that.
I recall this one. We were just waiting for a DEP number at the time.
So the septic plan has it as far away from the wetlands as possible, replacing
Yeah.
a leach pit. So it's a great project to do, and other
Yeah,
systems.
it was
in
definitely an
play.
improvement. I'll entertain a motion to approve the NOI for 11 Ordway Street.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the NOI for 11 Ordway Street, GCC 2014-27, DEP number 161-0799.
Second.
We have a motion, and it's been seconded to approve the notice of intent for 11 Ordway Street, GCC 2014-27. Is there any further discussion? There were no comments from the DEP, I'm assuming.
Correct.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All abstaining? Motion carries.
Probably should have been off camera a little bit longer, because now we have 8 minutes to the next hearing.
Well, what can you update us on?
Oh,
Oh, perfect, Laura's always good at filling voids.
I was just going to make the point that the MACC conference is coming up this weekend, which is the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissioners, and they have some really good workshops for new commissioners. And that's in Worcester, at Holy Cross in Worcester.
I
And
know
they
Nick-
also have other, workshops as well, which are really valuable. Their focus this year is about climate change and what effect that will have on, maintaining open space as well as
You mean
stormwater
the
regs.
global warming we're experiencing now?
Yes, that global warming. If you lived in Alaska, you would think that
Well, that's what
global
I've
warming
heard.
was a
They're
big
having-
problem.
They're having trouble with snow for the Iditarod dog race, so maybe
That's
they can make
right.
it here.
Exactly, we could send them some. But anyway, if you, oh,
I think Nick wanted to go to those.
Yes, he
so
did.
You can always get a carpooling
those are really
situation.
valuable, so maybe,
Yeah, they are good.
Rachel, you could email Nick and see if he's going out, and,
I'll send you
I'll
the link
help
tomorrow.
register you, because
I can,
tomorrow, you're not
Oh,
in
I'm not here
tomorrow.
tomorrow. I can send the link Monday, or Laura can do it tomorrow.
Yeah, but
But
it's
it's this weekend.
Saturday.
It's not gonna
Laura
do as
can
much
send it
good
to
on
you.
Monday.
I'll send it to you,
Will
okay?
you send it to me too?
Yeah,
Yeah,
mhm.
Great.
Commission.
Is it Saturday or Sunday?
Saturday.
You can actually send it to all, because I think Nick's on vacation,
Okay.
which is why he's not here.
And you get to have lunch in the Holy Cross dining room, which is like this amazing,
So typically,
quite groovy.
if you guys do decide to go, typically, the commission will pays for the training, but typically we prepay it. So what you might have to do is pay for it, and then we'll just reimburse you afterwards.
Okay.
So, but technically, we always pay for the training for the commissioners.
Do you know
So-
what the fee to go to it is?
Laura, do you remember? It's 40.
I can
It's really
determine that
reasonable.
in
I
a
mean, the commission
nanosecond.
pays for the memberships
Yeah.
too, and
Well, we have a membership because I've been receiving emails. Have you, as a commissioner?
yes, I get
Yeah.
it.
And, yeah.
I don't think Rachel is on yet, but, so you might, I think it might be $40 or something like that, and then we'll put in to get reimbursed.
And are we supposed to pre-register?
Probably, yeah.
But I believe you can do that by email.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have to do it tomorrow if we're gonna, right?
Mm-hmm.
The tree bylaw, does the commission want me to look into, we had talked earlier about that, kind of pretty much finding, I think Boxford has a good tree bylaw.
Mm.
I can look into it. Again, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Other towns have these similar bylaws.
Mhm.
If you'd like, I can look into.
I definitely
towns.
think there should be a focus on that. It's something that I think is really missing in this town.
Okay.
She swallowed her tongue.
So, I'll find a kind of a representative town
Yeah, I mean,
similar
then-
to Georgetown. Boston's probably not a
Right,
bad
get,
example.
get a few different examples, so we have something to go on, so we can compare.
And I can always put it on for discussion item for future meetings,
Great.
'cause, we'd have to figure out who's actually putting it forward to the town as a project. The commission's probably the best place to start. That killed
you
another
okay?
30 seconds.
Yeah, it's just a lot of money to attend. It's $115.
Wow.
Well, as far as conferences are concerned, that's pretty cheap, I mean.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So we would definitely
So
pay you back.
we usually prepay it, so you guys don't even see the, you know, you say, I want to go to the conference. We sign you up. We get, you know, we pay for it beforehand. You know,
Well, maybe they'll invoice the town.
you could actually ask that
Carpool.
when you,
Yeah.
if you guys carpool, ask them if they'll, because you're both members. You're whether you know it or not. We subscribe you to MACC every year, so they can build a town. You can ask them to build a town.
Oh, okay.
They should do that. It's actually a good idea. But it's a good conference to go to. And they offer workshops year-round, so something that you're interested in pursuing one angle versus another, you can kind of focus your attention on different workshops and conferences. Yeah, for like a certificate program, if you go to all 15 of their workshops, you get a little, you know, certificate. A lot of times commissioners just focus on what they're interested in. Let's see what else we could go on. Budget season is up and running again. Typically, the commission doesn't express too much interest in getting involved in the budget. Nothing has changed from last year.
Well, we
They pretty
should-
much ask us to put in a budget with no increases, and through the process, they include, I think last year was like a 2% raise for.
Oh, you mean for people employed here?
Correct. So
Oh,
Susan,
okay.
Susan and myself.
This
are-
isn't the budget for town
Nope,
spending
nope.
money on
Well, it is.
open
The
land and
big, the
stuff?
big picture budget
Oh.
is up.
It's the
We're one of
department's
a-
operating budget.
Oh,
So it's the Conservation Commission's budget, you know, one of the smaller departments in the town. There's a couple that have one-person departments, but we're one of the smaller departments.
so, okay, but it's not for like funding for projects
Well,
around the town?
that too, though. This-
or it
so-
is?
So this is, what I'm talking about is kind of the fiscal budgets for the departments, but when you go to town meeting, you know, the CPC and other
Yeah.
warrant articles for putting money towards other big projects is also
Is there?
discussed. Again, if you are interested in any of the budgetary stuff, whether it's just the Concom's budget department or the town budgets, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me emails or any questions. So I think the first Saturday of next month is a FinCom presentation on Saturday where all the departments go, and it's kind of an opportunity to present our budgets and have questions asked by the FinCom and any citizens that choose to go. It will be on camera. We've been doing this for the past 5 years. They used to have it come in evenings only, you know, 3 departments a night, every other week. And they just started doing this where it's, everyone comes in on a Saturday and just,
Yeah, and-
you burn a Saturday, but
and,
you
you
get
know,
it done with all at once.
If
Yeah.
other commissioners wanna get involved in other subcommittees or activities like CPC or open space, you know, you wanna think about those
It's actually a
things,
good point. So we have, I don't know if anyone is interested in going, participating in CPC, but we have one seat on the CPC from the commission. And Carl has been kind of the default setting. If no one else is interested, Carl tends to be as a chair. He goes, and again, I don't know your interest in it. If there's anyone interested in sitting on CPC, I can explain what CPC is to you later. You know, again, you can arm wrestle Carl over it, but I don't think he'll fight too hard.
Have at it.
But it's a good, so when you talk about money going to different uses, that's where that discussion happens, related to CPC funds. We've purchased that Driftway acres a number of years ago with CPC money, the conservation restriction for Whalebrook Farm a couple of years ago. You know, it's
Bailey Woods.
Bailey Woods. Over the years, we've purchased a lot of really, really good land and done a lot of really good projects with CPC. We've had a couple of dry years, but it's still, if anyone is interested in sitting on that board,
How often do they meet?
Carl's.
More
pretty-
often than this commission. Every 2 weeks.
Is that
All
right?
year round
In-
or
in-
just
actually-
No.
the
So I think
season?
it's, so when it comes, before, they have a season where they
The
really
busy
start
season,
discussing
the busy season is almost
suggestions.
every week.
In season, it might be a two-month busy season. It's every week, every other week. Off season, it's probably once a month. It's kind of like the budget season. You know, FinCom's
Well-
really, really active right around that period of time. This group, there's all the suggestions that they get in. They have to review those and decide which ones they're going to fund, and which ones they're going to recommend funding. Then it goes before the town to vote on it.
Oh.
So, it definitely has a busy season, but the rest of the year.
When,
it's-
what time of year is the busy season?
Well, it really depends when they open for accept new projects. The commission itself, the committee itself votes when it will accept dates when it'll accept new projects, opening
Yeah.
and closing dates.
Typically, the end of the busy season is kind of when the budget is in and all the warrants are due. So right about now is when they end their busy season.
Okay.
Because they need all their recommendations have to be ready for town meeting.
But just understand that the vast majority of the money is already pre-spent for many other projects, so.
Almost.
So there isn't as much these days money for open space as there was a number of years ago,
Could it ever go back the other way?
maybe in a decade or so.
Again, it's, but we need representation on the board to discuss these things. And so if it's something that you are interested or passionate about, it is definitely something that I'm sure the commission would happily vote you in. But we can talk more offline if you want to hear more about what they actually do, and you can go to one of the meetings and see how it
Okay.
works if you're interested. We're all set for the next meeting, Carl.
Okay.
Next agenda item.
And let's see, it being off after 8:10, this is an NOI. We're
Yeah,
gonna
new one.
Open up a new NOI for 340 North Street, GCC 2015-1, that's a tree cutting. If I could have the applicant and a consultant on this particular issue, the project. Wanna come up here and identify yourself, please? Come on up, folks, and have a seat.
Hi.
Hello. Okay. Give us a little background on this.
Oh, I'm Nancy McGuire, and this is my father, Emery Booth. You're welcome.
So I was driving by the property and just noticed some tree activity, some really heavy equipment. This is 340 North Street. There was a crane pretty much cutting trees down in one pass. Very impressive operation, actually. Got on property, contacted the kind of person in charge, who is here tonight actually, from the tree company, and asked him to pretty much shut down while we discussed what was going on.
Can you speak up?
Sorry. Yep. So what we discussed was pretty much identified the trees that had been cut down and what trees they were looking to cut down. Based on just a really, really basic evaluation of the site, before the snow came down, it was clear that some of the trees were in the 50-foot no cut, no disturb.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them were in the Concom's jurisdiction, which is 100 feet.
Right.
So at that point, I pretty much asked them, there was a couple more trees they wanted to cut down that were, in my opinion, dangerous leaning over the house, so I gave them the okay to cut those trees down. But after that, stopped all the work, no more tree cutting. Wrote an enforcement order. They provided the plan that you see. Again, keep in mind, this is not a stamped engineered plan. This is, the gentleman's an ex-engineer, so I believe his skills are credible. I reviewed the wetland line, and I'm comfortable with the delineation, but the commission has to realize it's not to the inch. So a handful of trees, they've decided not to pursue cutting down as part of this notice of intent. They were originally gonna include 5 more trees, and through the process decided to remove those from the plan. So everything that you see right now, all the trees have been cut down. This is kind of going through the process after the fact.
I'm sorry, I don't have a plan.
It's on, there's a small version in your packet, about 3/4 way through.
So
There's
folks,
also
The
some,
bigger packet.
there's
I have-
also,
I have a tiny packet.
She doesn't have the bigger packet.
what was the goal here? Were we just trying to clear some woodland?
you.
I mean, what was the actual intent here?
The intent was, my father was, there were several very tall trees very close to the house.
Mm-hmm.
He was worried about the house and his well-being in the house.
Some of these are very close to your house.
Yes,
These are them?
yes.
And what kind of trees were they?
The double one there on the top of that cluster was a double oak,
Uh-huh,
and the rest of them were pine.
okay. Were they
They,
large?
the oak was,
12 feet away.
but it was a double oak, and each one was about that big.
Wow.
I would say it was
Amazing.
probably 70 feet tall. The
Wow.
pine trees ran probably 60 to 100 feet.
Oh my gosh.
Some were this big, some were this big, some were large. The oaks had limbs that were extending over the house, which Steve saw. That was a primary reason for cutting them.
So just so you know, anything within 100 feet of a resource is within the commission's jurisdiction, and you can't just go ahead and cut it on your own. I mean, if it's a safety issue, we certainly can authorize it, and we certainly do, but you still need to contact us and let us know.
We did
what's-
not realize that at the time.
Let us know what's going on.
Unfortunately.
They've become aware.
And if it's,
Oh, yeah, we're very aware now.
and, we certainly, allow people to deal with emergency situations, and we can.
Can you
we
hear him, Dad? If you
No,
talk
I-
just a little slower.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I'm here mostly because he is very hard of hearing.
yeah,
He
if-
understands well, but
if, we certainly can deal with emergency situations, but we still, in some cases, the paperwork can be filed after the fact if it's an emergency, but you still have to go through the commission. We have that jurisdiction within 100 feet of any kind of a wetland, a river, a stream, or anything of that nature. So you just can't go in and, cut things down without having a discussion with us. And,
it would have been easier.
very
to come.
minor things don't necessarily need a hearing, but if you're gonna do, significant clearing or tree cutting, you gotta file a normal situation. But again, we can deal with emergencies if like in a winter condition, if a tree is gonna come down, just a phone call
Yep.
is all you
Steve
need to
mentioned
do.
that to me.
And, we certainly can authorize that. We don't
Did
want
you catch
anyone's.
that? Oh, good.
We don't want anyone's property to get damaged, for bureaucracy. So
That's nice.
we can deal with that.
Yeah.
And we do quite often.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's see, are you gentlemen back here from the tree company?
Yes,
And, are you aware of the regulations, state regulations?
I am now.
Because they're not new, they've been around for quite a while.
Yep, this is my first time experiencing this.
Yeah.
I've been here for 60 years, and I didn't know about them. I've been in that same property.
Yeah, I mean,
Owned it for 60
the
years.
Wetlands Protection Act goes back to the 1980s,
Yeah.
so it's been in place,
He said the
pushing.
act went back to the 1980s. We
Yes,
just,
I know that's true.
yeah,
But
we
I
looked it
still,
up.
I still was unaware of it.
Yeah. We know about it now.
Have you taken down everything you need to take down, or are there more trees that you need to cut now?
At this point, I'm willing to quit and think about it. I wouldn't have done what we did had I known that this law existed. No idea. And the trees are all on high ground.
Yeah, they are.
I know.
They're not low, they're not down in, oh, I'm sorry. They're not down where the
Wake us up.
wetlands are.
The wetlands here are
I
very,
had no way of knowing.
That's the area.
So is this after the cutting?
Yes.
And are there
All of
more
those
trees?
are after.
Those are
In-
left, yes.
Are there more in here that you wanted to take down?
There had been
Yes.
some, yes. But they're
Okay.
in the 50-foot buffer zone.
I see.
so there was a small pod of trees inside the 50. If you draw a line from the corner of the house to where it's labeled marsh, there was a small group of trees that they were interested in
Look
cutting
down
down.
here, near the greenhouse. They were
So-
up along here.
Oh, these?
Yeah, in that area.
They were, yeah, right about there.
So are these threatening your greenhouse?
Well, they're all gone. Everything on this map,
Everything on that map is gone, but the ones
Okay.
we had been looking
Are
at
in
were
that
in this
area.
area.
Oh, I see. They're more in the 50 then.
and at the time I stopped work, I allowed a few more trees to be cut down that were
Yeah.
closer to the house, and they said, we want more trees over there. And I said, I can't authorize those because they looked healthy and they were well within the 50 foot. They're probably 20 feet from a wetland.
I see.
And I just
Okay.
asked them not to cut those, but I allowed them to cut a few more trees down that were near the house just to try to work with them.
So they were sort of here,
Correct.
like that.
One of them was probably 15 feet, 10 to
Okay.
15 feet from the wetland.
Now, this house was, how old is the house?
How old is your house, Dad?
1945. I bought it in 1955.
All right.
Moved in.
And so 55, a lot of these trees probably grew in since you moved there,
Yes.
right?
A lot of
Most-
the trees grew.
They were like this, many of them when we
They're-
moved, and now they're
they're 100 feet tall, they're just huge.
Some of those trees weigh
They like the area.
15,000, 16,000 pounds.
Yeah.
They're huge.
So a lot of this is kind of procedural. You know,
Obviously,
the work
after
was
the
done
fact.
before permission was asked for. The only two, as far as the regulation, I mean, that's what we're talking about, is what the regulations allow and don't allow. The two trees by the greenhouse that are inside the 50 are really the only two that stand out to me as far as their distance. Everything else is outside the 50, and again, the regulations say, you can do it, but it's still up to the discretion of the commission to allow it between the 50 and the 100 foot. The group closest to the house, I'm not concerned about at all because they're outside the 75 and they really were overhanging the house. The couple close to the 50 foot but still outside of it were probably borderline. The couple that are by the greenhouse, again, they were overhanging the greenhouse, but it's an older greenhouse and this concern about a tree hitting the greenhouse, there's 100 trees within 100 feet of that greenhouse that could take the greenhouse out. So given the trees to me appeared healthy, and those are the only two that I really have any heartburn over, to be perfectly honest with you.
What do you mean heartburn over?
They were healthy trees they needed a waiver to be cut down, and I don't think there's a reason to cut them down, to justify cutting them down. So if you want to cut a tree down within 50 feet of wetland, you need a reason. The reason here is, well, they're concerned about it falling on the greenhouse. There's 100 trees that can do that, so we
But
tend not to. lean
Mr.
that direction.
Bose also said that the branches were overhanging. So these trees that were very close to the
Yep.
greenhouse, they had branches overhanging the greenhouse?
Yes, the big pines, yes.
Okay, and that's different from perhaps the other trees that you're
Correct.
talking about?
Correct.
Okay.
So one of those was a mid-size oak, and the other was a big pine,
Right,
and the oak was definitely leaning well over it.
right.
Yeah, a lot of them, I'm sorry, a lot of them my father picked because of the way they were leaning, that he felt that you can't predict how a tree's gonna fall if it is to go on its own, but it seemed like that would be the trajectory, would be to one of the buildings.
Right.
How long has the greenhouse been there? Was that originally on the property, or did you put that in since you were
There
there?
was a greenhouse in that position. It eventually fell apart and I rebuilt it to my own design. That was a swimming pool underneath
Yeah.
originally, and the chap who owned it converted it into a greenhouse.
When did you build the greenhouse as it is now? Do you remember?
God, I don't know. My
It's
son
been since
helped
I
me
was a kid, so.
around
at least
1970,
40
I
or
would
50
guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So are there more trees that need to be taken down?
I think originally there was a handful more that they were planning and hoping to cut down, and again,
This is a tough time for
I-
us to assess them.
yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
how you determine, this 500-foot pine
I'm not
trees
planning to take any
in a
more
pod.
down.
Yeah.
So I think at this point they're not interested in cutting any more
Yeah, he
down.
just said he's not planning on taking any more down.
Okay,
I don't see any that are a big danger, if that's your question. I don't want them to walk by saying no more trees just to make it a path of least resistance. Your
Right.
concern is if there are any more trees that need to be cut down, let's
Yes.
talk about those.
that is
I
my
don't-
concern.
I don't see any that are outliers being like, oh my God, that's gonna fall any day.
Okay,
Everything that was a danger is gone.
okay, good.
And just, for your edification, a commission of any town can fine someone $300 a day for violations. And just for you folks in the tree company, the same could apply to you as well. I mean, if you're running a business, you're obligated to be aware of the laws and regulations in the Commonwealth. So you need to be aware of that.
Town by town, every
Had that my
town you
first
go
day in
to,
this.
you will need to check their
Yeah.
wetland regulations whenever you go, as you move around.
And a lot of homeowners don't know them,
No, they don't.
so it really behooves the company to.
So
Ask
as a
questions.
tree company, it really would be helpful if in your
Yes.
business, you folks would apprise homeowners and say, hey, we can cut trees, but this looks like you need to talk to the town before you go ahead and do this. So instead of just saying, I got a chainsaw, we'll travel, you as a business should be apprising homeowners too and saying like, nah, maybe we shouldn't do this until you get approval. Check with who you need to, and then we'll do it. Not just say, I'll cut whatever you want. Because again, this commission or any commission, any community could fine you as a company.
So at this point, we actually can't close this out because the DEP hasn't given a number or comments yet.
Okay.
So my hope is just to get, some feedback from the commission on how they feel about the project. This will get continued to the next meeting, and hopefully we'll have, I don't foresee the DEP having any issues with this. It's gonna
Right.
come
Yeah,
back.
so I mean, it sounds like the applicant doesn't wanna cut any further trees right now, and he wants to just, what's taken down, as far
Be
as,
approved
yeah.
after the fact.
Mm-hmm. To approve your,
We just need to be approved after the fact, and that you do not want to cut any more trees at
That's
this
right.
time.
If I do, I will make a separate NOI sometime in the future. And we'll go through the whole, now that I know the procedure so well, unfortunately. I don't intend to cut any more trees at this time
okay.
on this NOI, none. I wish
Mr.
I hadn't done the ones we did, but I can't take them back.
I think I'm right in saying that if you have an emergency tree, you can call the office and Steve can issue an emergency certificate for it to come down. This procedure doesn't need to happen every time, especially if you have an emergency with a tree.
Well, with
Am I
emergency-
right?
You have to do the paperwork after the fact.
Right.
But you deal with the emergency like anything else.
Exactly.
You deal with the emergency in front of you, and then you can deal with the paperwork afterwards.
Mhm. So are we going to, we can't
We gotta
close it.
continue. So I'm looking for a date for continuance. I'm assuming March 19th is the magic.
He's looking for a
Date?
date to continue.
March 19th at 7:40 is the next opening.
I don't think he understood the reason why.
Oh, we can't, they can't close it out, Dad, because we haven't heard from the state.
Oh,
We represent the town and the
Yeah.
state in this commission. We represent the town of Georgetown and the Massachusetts DEP here. So, we need to hear back from them, get a number from them to close
Yeah.
it.
Can I ask just some feedback from the commission? If the DEP comes back, are you guys okay with closing this? So that way you might not need to come in the next meeting. It might just be an administrative act. And that way you don't have to come out in the weather and sit with us. So I haven't heard any big issues with the commission that would lead me to think they're
No.
gonna deny it next meeting, so, okay. Awesome. So I'll talk to you before that meeting, just to
Okay.
make sure everything's ready. And at this point, you won't need to come in, but we can talk before the meeting.
Yep.
what was that?
There's been no objection
Okay.
to finishing this out, and when they get confirmation from the state, he'll let me know.
Oh, I see.
We
So
may not have to come to the next.
Not gonna set a date now. I
Yeah,
see.
well, it's for
Actually,
March,
we are gonna
it
set a
is
date.
for March 19th.
And
March
we're gonna
19th.
Yep.
make a motion right now when that is gonna be. I'll
But-
entertain a motion on March 19th,
Mr.
7:40.
Chairman, I would like to make a motion to continue 340 North Street, GCC 2015-1, and DEP 16107 to March 19th at 7:40.
Second the
There's
motion.
a motion, it's been seconded to continue this notice of intent to March 19th at 7:40 PM. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All abstaining?
But
Thank
you probably don't have to come.
Our agent can contact you if,
That would be good.
ahead of
Okay,
time.
yeah.
It's difficult. I'm 91 and
Well, thank you for coming out. That's a nasty night to come out.
And you cleared the walk, it looks good out there, thank you.
actually the
Appreciate that.
fresh air probably does me good, but
Oh, it's cool out there right now, so we're good? Steve will get in touch with me,
Thank you, sir.
okay.
okay.
Thank you very
Get all your
much.
stuff.
Good
I'm
evening.
sorry the
Thank
way
you.
that happened. Thank you.
So, Carl, the next discussion item is that One Industrial Way enforcement order.
I can go home?
Upstairs.
Fastest meeting I've ever been to.
Not done yet.
Okay.
You know, that's a
Jinx
really,
us.
that's such a good point about how the company who was working for them should have taken better care of them.
They gotta move.
No, I don't know.
I mean, I work for a business and it's my
Right.
job to know what the laws and regulations are,
Right.
so.
You get asked all the time to do stuff, it's you know, you have to have approvals
Trying
from
to find
people.
out if anybody parked.
So do you check the regulations everywhere you go?
Is there any cars they announced?
I'm trying to know that if it's within 50 or 100 feet, you need to do something.
No, just right against, directly. I'm next to the, you're in.
It's amazing.
If you're the Jeep, you're in the way.
You're about to lose a
Yeah, I know.
Well,
Or just that
Maybe they
vehicle or
don't
any
know
other?
no,
that's
there's two down there.
What's the other one?
It's like a little
Just
four
do
door
it.
car.
Because there's still that
car.
Okay, Pat,
opinion
Just
out
anybody
there
who's right at the
some-
building.
With a lot of contractors that you do it first and ask forgiveness later.
Did anyone park out back?
I'm parked next to you, and I got a blue Jeep out there, I'm parked next to you, Cherokee.
I'm out front.
I'm out front.
Okay.
Are you blocked in?
There's these ones.
thank you.
Actually,
anyway.
all these people leaving, probably it's one of
I was
theirs.
gonna race you.
You're not comfortable with the
You know
Thank
I
you.
do.
I know. That's why I'm glad
So
to
they're in the ice stands off the town, the building tonight.
How are they getting them off?
They have a lift, so they're putting a person up there in a lift, just breaking them off. And there's probably a 15-foot icicle hanging off the back.
You saying that?
Thank you. I sure will. Thanks for the color coding, that really helps.
Try to make it easy. I'm gonna try.
Thank you. Okay, this is not a hearing right now, this is a enforcement order discussion. And I think we'll wait till the rest of
Yeah,
your
let's wait
team
till
is
Chip comes back.
back.
Yeah, Paul Marchionda. You want one of these for you also? They're free.
Issue commission magnifying glass.
You know, I
Old
never
eyes
brought
can't
my
see these
glasses.
things.
Did you bring a big bag of cheaters with you?
I don't care.
I'm fine, thank you.
I do, it's a sharing between 4 people though.
Well, we have the big board here too, it's the same thing.
Oh, right, okay,
It's just, I figured that way in case I'm pointing something here, you wanna look at it. in front of
okay,
you, make it easy
great,
for you.
thanks.
We're all done, Chip, you can leave.
The other car is a Sebring.
Oh, you know what, are there other meetings?
Are there, or the guys in the cable one?
Hold on.
We are?
You can go home.
All right, so, my name's Chip Nyland, I'm the attorney for the owner of the property. We've been at this for a little bit. The purpose of tonight is to do two things. I'd like to put things in context, then Paul will describe a couple of our options. And what we'd like to do is to get to a point where we can come back to the commission with a plan. So we want to talk about sort of principles and conceptual tonight to see if we can get this thing resolved. You know, we've said from the beginning that we want to restore the wetlands that have been altered. But there was a dispute as terms of what wetlands were altered. So you retained a consultant to take a look at the wetland line out there in November. And unfortunately, it didn't get finished. And now we've got 4 feet of snow out there. If as I read the BSC report, which I'm not sure if you got a chance to read, she came to certain conclusions about where hydric soils were, but she didn't come to any conclusions in terms of where the actual boundary was. We have our own people looking at her report, and we've got some disputes in terms of the way that they look at the colors and where things are. And I think the reason we're here tonight and the reason we came and talked to Steve this week is I'm not sure that's a whole lot gained by doing more of this, because I think we've got a pretty good idea of where the line is. We've got a 1996 plan where a line had been accepted. And so what we'd like to be able to do is to agree on a line and then agree on a way that we can go forward and continue to operate our facility out there with a submission. So that's the context. That's why we're here. The way we look at it is we could be doing monitoring wells in May or June, and it will just hang over us. So what we've done, and what I'm going to ask Paul to go over, is shown the existing conditions. When I was here the first time, my suggestion was we leave the wall where it is. We've given that up. So we're looking to move it, and we think it's substantial, the movement. That will be up to you in terms of whether or not that's something that's appropriate. So I think I would call it the four-prong test or four-prong approach. One is we're going to restore all of the wetlands that we find that are altered. Number two, we're going to move the wall away to what we believe is a safe distance, and that will protect the wetlands. Number three, we're going to install a wall over on the west side, which was actually a recommendation from your agent, administrator, because we don't want the same thing to happen to us on the other side of the property. And then the last is that we're going to have stormwater management to make sure that works. And the last thing I'll say before I turn it over to Paul is the location of the wall, even within your no disturb or no build area, is really premised on the fact that we've had the advantage of having this wall in place, and maybe we shouldn't get credit for it, but I think that we find that the wetland is very healthy. So I think the wall, as I said the first meeting, I haven't changed my mind. It serves two very important purposes. One, it's like a no build, no disturb line that nothing gets by. And the second one is important for our own purposes and for the neighbors, is it helps in terms of mitigating noise impacts. So we would like to have a wall. We think it helps environmentally as well as socially, and we're hoping that we're able to do that. So I think what I'm going to ask Paul to do is just walk through existing conditions and proposed conditions to generate some discussion in terms of where we're going to go.
As Chip indicated, we had a meeting with Steve yesterday, actually, and went over a bunch of different scenarios and stuff. And after we went with Steve we went with Steve Caruso, the owner, actually, to see, what can we do? How much can we push it to try to, get this problem resolved? So the first plan I have here is what I call the existing conditions, where I've colored in the heavy black line is the 1996 wetland delineation.
Okay.
The red line is the existing wall that's there, that tall wall. And then the orange is wetlands that was delineated in 1996 that is no longer wetlands right now today. And interesting enough, the blue area is actually an area that was not wetlands in 1996 that is wetlands today. It's physically wetlands today. You saw it out there.
And as you know, being in the business, that's why wetland lines, are only good for 3 years, because they're always doing something.
Well, I think when the activity that took place when that orange area was filled is probably what caused the other blue area to become wetlands. It, probably blocked the flow of water. It may become wetlands, but here and there, that's what it is. What we have today. So as I said, we sat down for several hours with Steve Caruso, really going over all different scenarios of what we could possibly do here, based upon our meeting with Steve and the commission's desires we've heard in the past, to see what we can come up with. And this is what we're proposing to do. The blue area stays the same. That doesn't change. It's still going to be there. The green area is what was wetlands in 1996 that we're proposing to restore to wetlands. Now, a suggestion that Steve had, and I kind of agree with him, this little teeny spot here, we decided that it made sense to come straight across here. Not that we couldn't do that, we could restore that piece if you want us to also. But I think we kind of decided that it made sense to come straight across, but, you know, that's, you know, can be done either way. What we'd like to do then is to build a new wall. This wall we're gonna build, or we propose to build, will be a structural wall, designed by a structural engineer, because the idea is the wall is gonna be able to withstand, if anyone were to hit it by error. If you recall that what's out there now, there's another little small wall in front of it to stop the truck from possibly hitting it. So we just can't afford to give them any more space, so in order to do that, we're gonna have to bite the bullet and, you know, either we don't know if it's gonna be, you know, poured concrete, reinforced concrete, or what it's gonna be, but it's gonna have to be a structural wall that would be capable of, if someone hit it, it wouldn't topple over. You know, and stop them. So that's indicated here by this yellow line. And then, if I understood Steve correctly, we talked, he wanted to kind of swing it around tied into the tree line, so it really kind of just protects the whole area. So I've shown that on this plan also. And again, before I go too far, this is just a concept at this point in time. If we can get beyond, get to first base with the commission as far as this concept being a good concept.
Are you proposing the block wall stay where it is, or I'm just trying to interpret the plan?
No,
away. The red
it will
wall goes
move.
away. It's
It will
just-
be
just
removed.
gone. Be
Right.
removed.
So, okay, so I see that the red line, it kind of goes back to the existing condition, but you're gonna take that out.
Yeah, the red line, it's the same red line that was on here.
Right, I got,
Yeah,
yeah.
but
so we'll take
that's
that out.
confused, yes, yeah, right, but it will be removed.
I left it there just for a point of reference for you.
Okay.
So what we're proposing to do is to have this end of the wall here to be 15 feet further into the yard, which is even more further into the yard than that little wall is now. Just into the yard, and then, and I said, Stephen suggested that we wrap it around, instead of stopping it right here, to kind of bring it around to tie into the tree line, which is fine with us. It'd be a little more work, but we would do that. This obviously would be a much more expensive wall than what's there now, because it has to be a structural wall. It has to be able to withstand, you know, on its own without having a protective barrier with it. Then the other part of it is, as we were talking yesterday, Stephen just looked at this spot over here and said, it might be a good idea to take some of those blocks that we have, those big blocks here on the field, and just stack them 2 blocks high in this area here to make sure that no spillover takes place from the piles into the wetlands in the backside.
Right.
So that was, you know, his suggestion. We said we have no problem with that. We'd be happy to do that.
So, I'm sorry, so this is kind of a siltation barrier,
Yeah,
right?
there is a sill fence there now. It's been there, but probably just in front of on the inside of the sill fence, we would stack these blocks.
Yep.
So it'd be a physical barrier, so
Yep.
nothing could spill into the, you know.
So that won't be very high.
No, just 2 blocks. It's
Right,
just gonna be
okay.
like this.
Good,
You
okay,
know, it's gonna be like
Probably 3 feet high, 2.5 to 3 feet high.
something like that, maybe my waist at most.
okay.
So that's kind of like, you know, what we did, and, you know, we tried to, we really spent a lot of time on this. I mean, I don't wanna, you know, gloss by that, you know, trying to see how we could move this barrier. You know, just the natural contour of the land, you know, just gets narrower up here. And, you know, and to keep the operation just in business, we really pushed the envelope here and try to, you know, push this thing as far as we can. And like I said, and we're gonna go to the extent of having it designed by a structural engineer, so it'll be a standalone structure. We'll not need anything in front of it to take up more space and to protect it.
So just to reiterate, the proposed structural wall you're proposing would be 25 feet from,
It would be on the far end here.
25 and then 15 on one side and the other?
25 feet from the replicated wetland on the south end. On the north end, it's 15 feet from the existing wall, you know, into the yard.
So you're essentially moving it 15 feet back.
But still in the 50.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And it's.
I thought it was more, I thought we were moving it more than 15. I thought it was,
No, 15 feet from this end here.
right, okay, oh, that's right, and
20
then 20.
25 feet
right.
from the.
So it's probably
Oh,
5
so
feet
this-
from the wetland.
I'm sorry, so this 15 feet is not how far you're moving it from the other wall?
No,
it's
it
how
is from the other wall. This,
Oh,
from the
okay.
red wall. it's
And
moving
this
15
is
feet
25 feet from the wetland?
From the replicated wetlands.
Great.
From the restored wetlands.
Yep,
But it's probably 5 feet at the closest point. If you pretty much right with the arrow for the proposed structural
Yep.
barrier, that's much closer.
Yeah,
The
that
other thing is-
jog where it goes.
Yeah.
It's about 10 feet. And this, the difference here, we gotta kind of put this in context too. When this wall goes in, I'm not sure how I'm gonna build it right now, or what to build it out of, but, you know, there'll be excavation and stuff like to make the wall go in. There's also gonna be excavation for the wetlands, so there's a big difference between putting a wall within 10 feet of an existing wetlands as opposed to putting a wall and building wetlands at the same time. There's a huge difference in that. So this distance here really is not critical in terms of, you know, protecting this restored wetland. because it'll all be done at the same time. When they dig the footing for this, it'll go down 4 feet lower than the wetlands grade, and then it'll just be backfilled with, the proper materials and a planting scheme or whatever, and you'll have the wetlands there. So it isn't like you have a wetland there today and you're digging next to the wetlands. You're not digging next to the wetlands, we're creating the wetlands, so it's a huge difference. And like I said, we're really trying to squeeze this as much as we possibly can to still have an operation here, And this is about 10 feet, it's not like 5 feet. It looks small on that plan, but.
So you have, under your setback, you have a 75-foot setback, and you have a requirement or an allowance that you can ask for a waiver or an exemption, which I think we would obviously have to document in any submission. And I think that that's what we've been talking about, is we think that there's a value to having that wall there in terms of protecting that wetland. There was also even a suggestion when we were talking about whether or not we wanted to build a wetland right up to the wall.
I mean, my question is more just, the discussion of how far it should be away. Not that I'm opposed to having some sort of a barrier, but, again, I don't like to see a lot of things in the buffer.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, and I think that when we looked at this, the issue is there a wall or isn't there one? Because at a point, he will make a decision that he can't put the trucks in there if the wall is, well, certainly at 75 we couldn't, or at 50. The decision would be we just wouldn't have a wall at all, which we don't think is beneficial in terms of the sedimentation it could get in, as well as from air quality
It'd be a
standpoint.
maintenance headache for us to keep maintain the silt fence.
How many rubble piles does he have down in that section? I'm seeing 2 on the map here?
Well,
or-
this is a survey that was done back in May, so I mean, this rubble pile may not be here today, but these piles are generally here. And, it's a fluid operation. I mean, it takes material in, he reprocesses it, it goes out. It's not just all the same every day.
So it's a recycling, where you bring the material in, you process it, and then you have your other piles.
Right. And we just think that, in our opinion, having some kind of a physical barrier here more than just a silt fence, it just makes so much more sense, because it just prevents anything possibly getting into the wetlands and harming the wetlands. And as Chip said too, we could, and this is certainly something that we would be willing to do if we want us to, we could restore this white area back here. We could make more wetlands up against that wall. We could have another almost 3,000 or 4,000 square feet of wetlands in here, be a positive of almost 4,000 or 5,000 square feet of what was lost. What was lost plus another 4,000 or 5,000 square feet. We could do that. I mean, this whole area could be
in
restored,
here,
because
where the
you're
wall
gonna be there
was.
anyways.
Because you're proposing retaining wall, you won't need to slope it on the
Right,
back of the
I'm
wall.
saying,
It must be flat
in
right up.
lieu of sloping it.
Because it's going to be so deeply set.
In lieu of sloping,
and
I can go
structural.
straight down, and I can make all this wetlands. You'd have another 3,000 or 4,000 feet of wetlands in here.
It would be right next
And
to
it'd
it,
be protected.
but I think what we've seen in the past several years is that wetland is healthy and has been able to coexist with the wall there. That wall hasn't had a negative impact on
It
it.
serves a good function.
So,
Well, I don't disagree that it may be a reasonably healthy wetland, but if you're doing it quantitatively, you have to just look at it from ideal conditions and say, how healthy would the wetland be if there were no operation there? I mean, it's all relative.
right.
You can still have species existing there with human activities, but, it's relative to how healthy versus
Well, there's
ideally
no-
what it would be.
But, when you have operations like this, generally you have sediment that's, is found, freestanding sediment, and you have to maintain it. And here, you don't have that, and that's why I think that's very important. And again, if we added wetland, then it would be, in addition to that's restored, we could call that mitigation or whatever you may call that, but it would be substantial, be a couple of thousand square feet of new wetland that we would
To be honest, that makes
create.
a lot of sense to me. I think it makes a lot of sense to take advantage of the space back here, just expand the wetlands. It just,
Can you explain to me, you're gonna take the existing wall down, you're gonna build another one. Where are you gonna work from how are you gonna build this? It seems to me there's a lot of potential to damage the wetlands
well,
in this whole construction project.
let me just,
So can you explain
Yeah.
what your?
How you would stage
goal
it
is?
from the
Yeah, how you
inlet,
stage
right,
it.
right.
right now tonight, we're trying to get, like I said, to first base of the concept. If the concept works, then I'm gonna have to develop a really good plan for you folks, and also, to go, to here, to show how we're gonna do that. But in generalities, we're gonna have to have siltation barriers, put right along the edge of the existing wetlands right now, because we're gonna start taking that grade and dragging it back to make a wetland. next, to expand the wetlands, to, to restore it and expand the wetlands. So we would protect us with, with silt fences, silt socks, all that kind of stuff. That'll be in place. All this excavation would take place at the same time, and what we would do here is, I think it makes sense, when I dig the footing for this wall, instead of stopping it, a couple of feet higher than the wetlands grade, go right down to 4 feet below the wetlands grade, and backfill it with wetlands material, and have all this entire area become wetlands behind the wall.
Well, you need to be careful in terms of creating wetlands. I've seen them done wrong, and they don't work well if they're, engineered incorrectly. And
Oh no, we're gonna if we're all on the same page here, we're gonna come in with the full plan to you with specifications of plantings and how we're gonna do it and what kind of bedding, what kind of material, what kind of soil, all that kind of stuff. We're gonna have our wetland science work on it. So I'm not gonna just say we're gonna dig a hole in the ground and it could become wetlands.
I've
See,
seen
the
that-
key
I've
to-
seen that done too.
The key to
Yeah, but I know what you're talking
the key to restoration is hydrology. You need to get the interface.
There needs to be
right.
water source, or it's not.
Or else it doesn't work. So the advantage we have here is we've got a number of pits taken by us and also by your consultant that's telling us where the groundwater interface is. And so that's where we got to get to, and then that should work. And we would expect that you would have, in addition to Steve, that you would have your consultant that would be overseeing that while we were doing the
We typically
restoration.
have a 3-year, monitoring window on
Right.
these things to make sure that they actually are working
Yeah,
properly.
that makes a lot of sense.
The
Yes.
fill that's in there, is that rock, or how long has it been there, and what is it?
Well, we don't, to this day, I still can't figure out when the fill went in there. My client bought the site, our client bought the site in 1996. We have aerial photographs of the site prior to 1996 that show this entire area already be denuded with trees and dirt was being pushed back from the prior owners. So we don't really know when it was filled and who filled it, to be honest. When we dug it, just normal, fill. There was some organic material, which it wasn't high quality structural filling. That was just just some rock.
Yeah, it's not bricks and rocks and those things.
It's not a debris.
It's soil.
It's
and
soil, but like a lot of organic soils, just tops, that kind of stuff, topsoil. Which
One of the questions that the soil scientists were looking at is compacting this soil. Did that make it hydric? Because that's one of the things that they're looking at. So it's not, I think it's clean fill that we would look at. It's not anything.
It's nothing
that you have-
bad.
And the plant material that's in there now is, what is it?
You mean the meadow down below?
No,
or?
that's in this area that you're going to be recreating.
Oh, it's
wetland.
grass right now. Right now, if you were to go out there behind this red wall, there's a flat area, then it slopes down to probably like a 2-to-1 slope or a 1/2 to 1 slope, and it's grass.
Is it mowed? Why is it still
It's
grass?
not mowed. It's just grass. It's
Just natural,
It's not mowed.
naturalized.
It's
It's just grass. Grass doesn't usually just stay grass. It usually gets.
The answer is because it was recently planted.
Right.
Okay, so grass
Last
was
summer.
planted. What was there before the grass was planted?
Historically a wetland. The wetlands
No,
were
but
filled.
but in between this long period where there was no wetland.
So my opinion, it wasn't that long.
Oh.
Their argument,
Okay.
you're hearing one side.
Okay.
My opinion is this area was recently filled, at
Okay.
least at the toe of the slope where this new grass is.
All right.
Because you have 1-year-old grass, what was there before?
Right.
This wasn't a 30-year ago fill. It might have been a creep. Again, the argument might be that most of it was done 30 years ago, but not all of it was done 30 years ago.
And we don't know what was there before, right before the grass. I mean, was it trees? Had it established
I
a
don't know.
permanent growth?
Well,
of
it was
any
probably
kind?
historically a wetland, so there was trees and
Right.
shrubbery and vegetation in there.
Okay.
Again.
And then we don't really know when this happened and what the growth was before the grass.
we
Was
don't-
the grass something you folks put in?
I think the grass was something that, what they were trying to do is make sure these wetlands weren't silted in or affected anyways. They have a good erosion control barrier in here, and they must have, before I got in the job, I got involved in November of last, this November made a year, so November of 2013.
They
So
put
sometime
grass.
before then,
They
there was some
seeded.
landscaping done or whatever, some seeding done, whatever, just to, make sure it was stable, there wasn't any erosion taking place. And there, I can tell you there was no erosion. It was very well stabilized. There was
Okay.
no erosion.
Well, I guess the reason for my question, and I'm sure this is a concept not to really consider at this time, but if it could be an established planting there, rather than go in with big equipment and dig the place up, and especially put probably a masonry wall right next to a wetland that's gonna drastically change the pH, could we establish a planting on that existing slope that would be a bordering you know, something that could take wet feet, but, you know, would be a tree line or a solid shrub line.
I mean, if the wall could get,
That would protect a
Yeah.
wetland better than a concrete wall.
so what was presented was the applicants, what they would like to do. I think there were a lot of options as far as that goes.
Right.
I think per kind of regulations, it's very important to restore the wetlands to where they were.
Yeah, we
To
do.
your point, creating some upland, I 100% agree with. I don't think we should have a wall with a wetland lapping up against the edge of it. I've always thought to create a little bit extra upland buffer, and you can put some upland vegetation. So you have a rock wall, slope with upland vegetation, and then a wetland. That's more of a natural system versus,
Right.
pretty much a retaining wall.
I mean, even those
But,
caged
from
rocks.
from the
would-
perspective of protecting, if they've got truck operations there, you do want some level of protection. It doesn't necessarily have to be a huge wall, but there should be something to keep those vehicles from, I'll call it mission creep or truck creep
Kind of weight.
from over the years. Next thing 5 years from now, you're back in the same situation, and they're moving materials in. I mean, it doesn't necessarily. I mean, that's really what we use granite bounds for. That kind of
Yeah,
same
the rock
concept.
wall is replacing these little 4x4 granite bounds that lawnmowers can knock over.
Right.
It's the perfect no-cut line, and I 100% understand where they're coming from, and I agree that it's a functional structure for a lot of reasons. My main concern from a regulatory standpoint and from a precedent-setting standpoint is I very much believe the wall is too close to the wetlands.
That's where I'm going with this. In other words, I would like to see the wall somewhere further out. I think a wall makes some sense here to keep those vehicles and those activities away. But my question is really where the wall should be, how close it needs to be from that actual replicated resource.
So I sent around some schematics I just kind of doodled up, and I did show it to these gentlemen at our meeting this week. My second wall, kind of showing the wall at roughly 20 feet, is very similar to the wall that they are proposing before you guys right now. My other sheet shows the wall at 75 feet, which is where the regulations say it needs to go. This is kind of giving you an idea of options, and where you can land on this. I'll be honest with you, typically in these situations, and kind of the precedence of how the commission has handled this in the past is you kind of split the difference. I've been recommending, and again, they can propose whatever they want. I've been recommending 50 feet buffer.
I mean, yeah,
'Cause
I'd
it
like
would
to
actually
I'd
save
like
some
to see if it's
precedence.
possible to do that. Maybe 75 is not possible. Maybe at 50 it is.
But I think 50 is a compromise. I think 20, and again, based on precedents and regulations, which is something that I feel I have to remind the commission of, because historically, we've allowed some walls around the 50-foot buffer. So I think, you would have sound precedents to say that that's allowable, given the situation, and given this case-by-case situation, the 50 is reasonable. Any closer to that, given all of the details, I would be very, I would recommend the commission be very cautious when it comes to the precedence of allowing that. And again, it's not just this project. You have to pay attention to past projects and future projects. And given this is a violation enforcement from the beginning, this has gone the range from we didn't fill wetlands to wetlands. Okay, apparently been filled. You look at the minutes. This has gone up and down 100 times. The commission really, I think, should pay attention. It's not the wetland filling at this point. The next real big concern is what your buffer is going to be. And the regs say 75. If they want to get rid of the rock wall and say we're going to get rid of the rock wall, my 50-foot recommendation doesn't go away. They still should pull that fill back to the 50-foot, and that's kind of a no cut, no disturb line.
That's where I'd like
So,
to see it.
Either way,
I'd like to see the wall at 50.
I think it's a compromise. given
I'd like to
everything.
see the replication on the wall at 50. I think that would be.
So you get some upland, which was one of Lilibeth's concern, of some upland replication, not just wetland replication.
Well, I can say that if it's 50 feet that we won't have a wall there. So, I mean, what we would deal with would just be with the restoration of the wetland and the, we wouldn't have a wetland up to the wall, obviously, so we would have the conventional buffer.
In that case, if you didn't want the wall, we would then probably specify like granite bounds or something, just to kind of keep your activities, hey, there's a bound there, don't go beyond this, keep your truck activities and tailing piles, et cetera, away from this area.
Where do you see those granite
Yeah,
bounds?
that-
Probably at 50.
See, that's where we have.
We've
a
been doing that
disagreement.
work, that work's taking place, and it's took place there before your 2003 regulations established those. The one point I did want to make is about precedent. You know, I'm a lawyer and I love to talk about precedent because in some instances I can make it used to my advantage. However, you have a waiver and exemption process, and no one can change or modify the setback unless you make a written request. And each one of those requests is judged on its individual merits. So this isn't a question of just coming in and offering. I mean, I think we have public reasons and environmental reasons to have a lesser setback than the 75, and we'd be willing to put that in writing and to judge it on its own. So that if you have individual decisions by a commission, that takes away the precedent issue. If we just said, well, we're going to put a wall up at 15 or 20 feet or 25 or whatever it is, yeah, then I would agree with Steve that somebody could back and say, hey, they put up a wall. But if we put up a wall with a basis for it in terms of the rationale for it, then that the precedent goes away. I'm not bought.
As you know, we can only look at the environmental, the wetland side. I can't talk about the noise. This commission
Right.
can't.
And if you noted, I mentioned environmental first each time before the noise. The noise to me is a secondary, but again, it's something that you could take into account from, because when you grant waivers or variances, you take a look at public purposes. And in this instance, I think that is a public purpose, and that's why I
in a
raised
sense, I'm not disagreeing from an overall perspective, but I'm looking at from the jurisdiction of this commission.
Right.
I can't rule based on noise per se. I mean,
And I'm not asking you to. What we're asking you to is to rule on whether it's going to be an adverse effect on the wetland. And, you know, there's a presumption that the buffer zone protects the wetland, so that's what we're looking to do, is to protect that wetland with a buffer zone, and we're enhancing that protection with a wall.
So to overcome that presumption, you have to prove that there's no detrimental activity with this plan. There's a presumption that you need a 50-foot buffer to protect the resources. You guys keep saying this is doing that, but you haven't overcome the presumption that there's a 50-foot buffer that's needed.
Steve, we really don't want to fight with anybody here. We're trying to work with you guys.
Right,
And like,
right.
what we said it a couple of times, maybe we're not saying it clear enough or whatever, so I'll take a stab at it. And we feel that there's irrefutable evidence that there's been activity on the site very close to and probably into the wetlands well before your 2003 regulations came into effect. So if the alternative is to put a wall or a barrier 50 feet away and it just kills our business, then my client's choice is going to be able to look at, I'll have no barrier, I'll deal with the noise or whatever, I'll just, fight about that battle, that's another battle I'll fight, but we'll just keep our operating, we'll put a sill fence.
but we had,
We don't
again,
get
I'm
the
not
50
trying to
feet
fight
apart.
either, but we had the bylaw before the regulations. So I mean,
Yeah, but you know what the law says. The law says is that it has to be, for setbacks, they have to be in writing. It's a very famous case that I know Steve knows, which is up in Andover. It's a very famous case. That in that case, they were actually proposing the setback as a regulation while the applicant was going through the process, and the court threw it out because they said the setback has to be in writing, and your setbacks weren't in writing until 2003.
I think
We
it's
don't,
all.
we don't want to fight over that. We're not looking to fight over that. We're just trying to find a common ground that we can all coexist. The wetlands
Right,
are protected. My guy can still do his job.
well,
and we think this
that's
is
my
reasonable.
goal. I mean, that's our
Exactly.
So
I
we're
agree,
looking
I agree.
upon our current setback as 75. We'll be willing to come in, but I mean, I'm not really willing to come into 5 feet. I mean, that.
Well, it's not
Well,
five.
we're not 5 feet. You got existing wetlands here that's probably like 30 or 40 feet away from where the activity's taking place. This is gonna be a restored wetlands. It's gonna be built with this structure at the same time. So there's no harm there's no fear of this wetland's not gonna be thriving. And we have no problem if you, as you suggested, if you wanna take this white area here and plant it with some upland species that helps protect the wetlands, we're open to that. We're open to all those things. We're just saying that we need to, limit this work area somewhere we can still have a business and operate here, and at the same time protect the wetlands. And we think we're doing that. We really, I mean, this wasn't a matter of just throwing this plan together. I mean, we spent hours with Steve Caruso yesterday going through it and measuring and and trying to think about and talk to the operations guys and how can we do this, and make this work. And this is where we landed. And I think it would be an injustice to say operate without any kind of barrier there. And once we have a barrier, once the barrier is there, whether we go 20 feet higher, who cares? Conservation Commission doesn't really care at that point. It's just, we're doing a dual purpose, but, you know, the barrier's doing its job, so. We're not making the case for the sound. It's kind of like the sound's basically just a,
I mean, I really would,
nice.
I mean, I'm okay with the concept, I just would like to see the barrier a little further out, I'm okay with the concept.
We've been doing that. We've been pushing them. We twisted Steve Carosso's arm for like 2 hours yesterday morning,
And that's as far as he thinks it can go
I
and
mean,
still
he's-
allow
You
him.
gotta twist a little, don't break it, you gotta twist a little harder.
Can
I
I
can
ask,
tell you right now, there's no twisting going to 50 feet. It's
I mean,
just,
if
you
you're
know,
out there, it's
just
like
not
a-
can I
gonna
ask,
happen.
Sure.
that's as far as he believes that wall can go.
Right. And that's why
And
he's
he
willing
will
to,
still be able to conduct his business.
right, and that's why he's
There's
willing to,
no more wiggle room to take it any farther.
right, and that's why he's willing to build a structural wall. It's gonna cost him a ton more money than just stacking blocks. Because he can't afford to give up
Put
another
the knee
10
wall,
feet
right.
for a knee wall to protect it. I mean, even, he just can't afford it, just.
I really appreciate the way that you have stepped up to bring that wetland back to every inch of what it used to be. I think that, I really, really appreciate that. And
Well-
your suggestion to actually bring it closer, I think that it would be better served if it were just restored to that 96 line, and then we leave that little bit of upland between there
Yeah, we
and
can
the wall.
plant,
Yeah, that's,
Right.
whatever.
Because that is an important, and I really do believe that the wall is important from a siltation point of view. And really, when we're looking at these waivers, we always look at public benefit. And so the noise is a consideration. And we've had, this whole room filled with people who were very, very unhappy about the noise. So,
Well,
You know,
I mean,
the-
do we actually quantify with a sound level meter what the wall actually does from a noise perspective? Is there
I don't think
talking
we've
about that?
quantified it. I can tell you that.
How many decibels on the A scale are we talking about?
I don't know the answer to that question, Mr. Chairman, but I've been told by Steve Caruso and Stephen Vigilista that the complaints have dropped off the face of the earth since they put that up. There haven't been zero complaints, but it's been like,
What was the ambient noise before the wall?
I don't know.
We have no data.
The other thing I just want to
but we
point out.
have anecdotal.
I think it's probably somewhere between 60 and 70 in that area, and it was far more than that, and it's down to that level, so
Has
it's.
he been
I
working this
do have some
winter?
background in noise level measurements.
Well, I don't know.
Right.
I mean,
So
been
there's
working
not ambient
since
air,
been
it's
here,
around
been
that
working.
60 to
Since-
70.
Right now, I can't tell you, it's all.
Laura,
so-
the noise complaints fluctuate depending on if he's got the crusher in. So if
It's not the crusher,
it-
Steve,
it's-
actually, they're called
it's
the,
a little bit of everything.
it's the
but-
tailgate slams.
So I've been
they're
doing
called.
some inspection with the
From the,
building
from the,
inspector. on
from the
this.
big,
When the
trucks.
truck dumps his stuff and the tailgate slams back in, that they're complaining about, so
They-
once you put the wall up, I've been
They
told by.
get 10 times more calls when the crusher's there. You can talk to the building inspector. There's a lot of misinformation. This was
Okay.
never even permitted by the building inspector. The noise. This has not solved the noise problem. This has not solved the noise problem. You go check the records. He still gets complaints when they're operating. They're not operating as much. There's not as many complaints. The other thing I heard some misinformation. We don't know when this soil was brought to this level, and they can't pull it out. We have a 1996 order of conditions that shows the topo, shows the grade. There was no soil there, and there was no soil proposed to be added. So I just want to correct that because I keep hearing soil's been there forever. We don't know. It wasn't there in 1996 when they bought it. They brought it in. It's
Wait
in
a minute,
violation.
you're
of the original-
talking about this fill that,
Correct.
this fill.
So then keep in mind, 1996 plan approved by the commission that was never closed out because they never complied with it. They never even started to comply with it. The original permit was for activity nowhere near this area. So when I keep hearing, well, the fill's there, let's just leave it, we can't pull it back. The fill was never there. We have a 1996 topo that shows, 96 grades, 76, 80. Right now it's 80 across the way. We know when the soil was put there. It was put in after 1996. Who cares when the regulation? Who cares when the bylaw was put in place? We have a violation of an order of conditions when the soil was put in. So talking legal precedents with, the courts is a moot point. They're in violation of an order of conditions. The commission could write an enforcement order saying, put it back to how it was approved. So I think there has to be more
Which
compromise.
would mean removal of all of this fill.
Of all of the fill that was put in the 100-foot jurisdiction of the commission, 100%. And that's kind of really what the commission should do to hold up a previous order of conditions that a commission like yourself issued. To go and say, oh, don't worry about that. That was a previous decision. That didn't count. We'll change it. That's really the standard I think you should be looking at, and then coming back from there. I think the wall at the 50-foot is a huge compromise. Unless you want to trash a previous order of conditions in a commission's decision and allow a violation to occur, then put it at 20 feet. But the whole point is to hold up previous decisions. You know, I feel like we're going in the opposite direction, hearing, oh, we don't know when the fill was put in, and there was always a wall. There was always a wall there.
What fill are you referring to, Steve? You said the
So
fill plan. What are you talking about?
you look at the plan, the 1996 plan. There was no proposed activity. There was no
That's not
proposed
true.
activity.
That's just not true. I mean, I didn't draw the plan, you didn't draw the plan.
Correct.
Some other engineer drew the plan.
Correct.
It's not a very well-drawn plan, to be honest with you. It's kind of a chicken scratch. If you look at the plan, I believe it showed a proposed tree line being way back in here. How did that tree line get there?
It was there in 1996. It was existing.
think so.
It showed existing conditions.
Coming in.
You yourself pointed out that the other plans.
We can
all the
argue about
top
this
one shows
forever.
that.
We're just, we're not, no, that's,
I
we're
have
not agree to
quick
disagree.
Question. Are the statistics on having wetlands replanted and the success rate in that, does anybody know what, have they seen
It's
it?
often not very good. So
Sure.
that's why they often suggest a two to one,
Okay.
because they presume the 1-to-1 isn't going to perform at the function of a real good
So to give
natural
it a
one.
good go,
So you
then,
do a 2-to-1 to kind of offset the lack of efficiency of it
okay.
being.
But isn't that often when you are replicating in a completely different site? This, we're taking a wetland and we're extending an existing wetland back. So
Correct.
I believe that that would work much.
You have a
If
better
it's-
chance.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's a better
Yes.
chance if it's
Right.
engineered correctly.
We're not going digging a hole way over there and
If you
replicating
do an
over there
isolated
where.
wetland, it's much harder. But
Right.
I guess to answer the question, it's true. They do not always function the same. The soil you put in might not be the same. It might not function as well. So Laura's right. There's ways of improving your chances. But that's why we do a 2-to-1, because we presume we're not perfect at manipulating nature. So you do a 2-to-1 to offset that lack of perfection
Okay.
in replicating.
Okay.
So just to reiterate, if the 96 plan, there was no activity up here at all.
My interpretation, and everyone I've had review this plan, you can say that the plan was drawn poorly. Every engineer in the world will tell you that when you show proposed, and this plan actually shows it over by that stormwater infiltration area, all of the proposed topo lines are solid. When you look to get a permit, you say, we want to do X. You darken those lines and you say, these are the proposed new lines. They always merge in with a faded out topo line. This plan, and if you look at the full size one, it shows the entire building site. Everything is dark and bold, and it flows into faded out dotted topo lines. The entire area that we're talking about does not have a single dark line, and you can say it's a bad plan. Any engineer that looks at this, you can't really argue that. I've showed it to every single land use person in this department. Our third-party reviewer, we all 100% agree that existing conditions, when this was permitted, the presumption is no activity because there's nothing shown. If you show big piles and piles show up, then you can look back and say, you guys permitted. See, here's the original approved plan, and it shows a 20,000 yard pile. What the plan shows is nothing. The old pictures show this area cleared in 1996. We keep hearing that.
1995.
1995.
We have a copy of it.
So they agree that before they bought the property, that area was cleared. They bought it and it still was cleared. Nothing has changed and nothing was permitted to change. Marches along and all of a sudden the soil shows up and we're hearing, well, it's always been there. No, it showed up after 1996.
when did
Maybe it
this-
wasn't on that plan because it was well beyond the buffer zone too. It's well beyond
When
the
did this,
buffer
when
zone.
did this business start as a,
1996.
so it's been here,
He's been here since 1996.
And a significant amount of this material, by the way, is outside the Concom's jurisdiction. That's why my little plan really zooms in on the 100-foot buffer. So a lot of those big piles are, but then you kick up the wetland to the north, and that top big pile encroaches on that wetland also. So, I think we really need to acknowledge, if you're gonna overturn a previous commission's decision, I don't know
Because
how
you're
that
not
could work.
Well,
overturning.
I'm
I-
not entirely
Going
sure,
back there.
well, never mind.
It wasn't closed out. That's a violation of the original order of conditions technically. After 3 years after they're done construction, they're supposed to request a COC. The new order of conditions, and I don't know how this one was written, there's actually fines that will accrue if you don't request closing out a project. So the fact that you don't just get an order of conditions and say, oh, we'll forget about it for 30, 40 years, and in 30 years it won't count anymore. We still really should be looking at an as-built and working from there, not working the other direction.
So what,
well,
we're not proposing any action on this fill.
Right now,
Currently,
we're only,
we are not
we are.
discussing
just the wetland.
just
component.
the wetland.
And then we're gonna do more of a retaining wall.
I
straight down.
understand all of that.
Correct.
But we are not, I mean, the grade has changed
None
by
of the
6
50 foot.
feet. 6 feet.
None of the 50-foot, and all the jurisdictional fill we're not discussing. It's really just, I say jurisdictional, it's from the wetland out jurisdictional. We're not discussing that. That's where it's gonna stay, and there'll be a wall, and they'll keep that land that they've created. What is being proposed to be removed is just the fill that was placed in the wetland.
Yes, I understand that.
Okay.
And so my question is, I mean, this is a substantial amount of fill within the 50,
Correct.
a substantial amount. And we haven't even discussed that.
Well, by their proposal to put the wall as they're proposing, 10 feet off the wetland, 15, 20, whatever it is, I can't interpret this plan, that would keep that the fill within the 50 would stay there
Right, exactly.
at about 80. a top
So
of
we
about 80.
haven't discussed any kind of mitigation for this amount of fill within the no cut, no disturb buffer.
That fill's been there for forever.
Well, the topo map from the 1996 order of conditions
What datum is that?
shows that the elevation was very different then.
There's some 90,
It's
Show it,
down
show it.
around-
80, I've got an 80, 78.
yeah,
So
so I
this,
see,
it's only this area here. This topo's exactly the same.
it is not.
It's
There's
about 80
there's a
feet.
74 that wraps around, so where the wetland is filled, there's a 74.
What number is that right there? It's 80.
You really expect me to see
This
that
is-
from here?
Well, here, take a look at it. Be my guest.
Thank you.
My Italian's coming out.
Just relax.
Yeah, it's the same one I have. I disagree, but again, we're gonna disagree
We
a lot.
surveyed it. My registered land surveyor put a stamp on the plan, so it's right.
I see 74 down here, which matches up with the 74
Yeah,
here.
There's no doubt some work's taking place in this area, obviously, at some point in time. There's no question about that. We're not arguing that, because this area's been filled. This is where the wetlands were. This is the
I
wetlands line.
understand. I'm looking at the elevations in here.
Yes.
And,
This is an 80 contour right here.
Yep,
This is an 80 contour right through here.
I'm sorry, where?
Right here's an 80 contour, coming right through here.
Through there. This is the 80
Well, this
here?
is-
Oh,
this
there,
is
no,
setback
that's the
line.
50 buffer.
Right.
What a small
So, I mean,
thing
if we,
with
if
lots
we,
of
if we
lines.
pull the fill out and restore the wetlands, and if we do allow a structure, I mean, that's a significant compromise as it is.
We're just trying to work with you folks. We're trying to do our very best. We understand this, it's a difficult situation. It's something that's not happening every day. We understand all that stuff. We're trying to work with you, and you know, we just can't meet all these current standards. As much as you'd love us to, and we'd like to also, we just can't. This is not a new thing. We've come up here with a proposal. I think that's, you know, my client's put a lot of time and effort into this proposal. I mean, conceptually, he's willing to spend a lot of money to rectify the situation here. He's even offered in the past, if he had other, you know, Steve was talking about more than a one-to-one replication. If he had others in town that needed some wetlands work, he would do some work. He's in the construction business. He would do it. You know, he wants to help. He's not looking to be a bad guy. He wants to stay in Georgetown. He's been here for a long time. He wants to stay here and keep working here. But we need to work together here. We can't start splitting hairs about what was done in 1996 and who drew the plan. And you know, I don't even know who drew the plan in 1996. I mean, it's you know, we should be dealing with the situation here we have here.
Well,
Well, you know, from my perspective, you know, as I said, we have to restore that area,
the wetland,
the wetland.
They're proposing
how
to
much
restore
of the upland is
Yeah,
what we're
I think-
talking about?
Yeah.
I think we've agreed that they've agreed that they are perfectly committed to restoring the wetland, and now we're talking about the upland.
You're talking about how much fill.
It really comes down to where the retaining wall is, and because where the retaining wall really dictates how much fill can be removed inside the buffer and inside the 50-foot.
Mm-hmm.
So if the wall goes at 50 feet, cuts straight down and maybe not go down as far, and then gently tapers to the wetland, then you get some buffer benefit
Okay.
before you get to the wetland.
And I appreciate your comment that the 50 is what is stated in our regulations, and that there is a waiver system whereby we can actually
We can
come to
request, and
an
you have your
agreement.
discretion
You
to
can.
act, right?
But I still think, we understand the waiver system, however, am I understanding that we still think the wall is too close? We're happy, we understand the waiver.
I'm gonna have to ask for a waiver regardless.
Right,
Right.
Because the 75 is the
We're
actual
gonna need a
standard,
waiver.
the
Right.
requirement is 75.
Right.
If you're gonna allow a wall, we will need a waiver to the 75-foot setback
Correct.
requirement. We're not arguing that with you, we're agreeing with you,
Right.
100%.
Whether
So-
it be
We don't
50,
think we need to
30,
ask for
or
a
20,
waiver
right.
to work within 50 feet of the wetlands. Okay, that's the difference. We don't think we need that waiver, but we do need the waiver to put the wall in. So if we can all agree to that, then we can work on, where the wall's gonna go. And
Well, I'm to that point. I mean, okay, we restore the wetland, that we now we just need to figure out where that wall goes.
right.
If you feel you need a wall, I mean, I feel there should be some sort of a line of demarcation, you may wanna call it anything you want, to keep activities and also to keep, stormwater runoff and other things out of the resource area.
This is not benign material that they have up in that yard. I
So,
want to keep it out of the
so even if you
wetland.
try and restore that upland, with these kinds of activities in close proximity to a resource area, you're gonna have runoff, and you're gonna have,
Right,
cause it's not vegetated, you've got trucks running around, piles of other materials, there's gonna be runoff unless you have some sort of barrier there.
totally. And the truck activity is just
Yeah, once you
compounding
com-
whatever material is being stored
And
there.
once you compress all those soils, with truck tires, you're not gonna
Right.
have anything growing there anyway.
Right,
So you're always gonna have this little bit of a moonscape around there, so you have to have some sort of barrier there to keep those
right.
materials out of.
I agree. So I do think the wall is important.
I agree.
Is that what you're saying to me? You think the wall is
I
important
think everyone's
too?
in agreement on the wetland being 100% restored and
Right.
the wall being in place. It's just
Yes,
where
but
the
they're
wall.
talking about if
Potential.
we ask for the wall to go
Yep.
much farther back,
Yep.
that there will not be a wall,
Yep.
because
But
they
because
will
you see-
need to be
you can
working in that
They
area.
can see they're presuming that they'll be able to work still up to the 20-foot, right? So take the wall out. They're kind of saying that they can still do work to 10 feet
Sneak
from the
up
wetland.
there.
No, see, that,
This
that,
is
Right.
Carl brought up earlier. If you want to get rid of the wall, fine, but there's still gonna be a no-cut 50-foot bound being put in place. So it doesn't remove the buffer.
If you,
And we
can
can
I
show
ask
that
you, if
throat.
you start in he started in 1996, you said, okay. So the piles that are shown there on your map presumably have grown considerably.
These piles are kinda like, they're fluid, I mean.
No, I understand that, but the business has expanded. So he really needs more room than he used to, and I understand that he has a machine that's a crusher that's.
What he does,
So when he got that crushing machine and he expanded his business, what I'm wondering is, could he shrink this part of his business here, make the neighbors happy, get his pile small? Maybe he could find a place where he's not disturbing his neighbors to move the crushing part of his business?
Well, when he started.
To another site.
When he started this in 1996, that was, he would take material in here and then material had to leave, come and go. Then he started processing it on site, to make it really a green operation. Instead of stuff being buried somewhere, it's now being processed and used in building roads and things of that nature. In terms of the neighbors, there's not too much more we can do to make them happy. Whether we really ever make them happy, I don't think we'll ever make them happy. He's been here before they were here, actually.
But the
They came
crusher
after him.
wasn't.
Well, the crusher only operate. He brings a crusher in. He doesn't have a crusher on site all the time. He brings it in. In other words, instead of crushing all the time and making noise all the time, he will let material come in, and when it gets to a point where he's got enough material to process, he'll bring a crusher in and process it inside of a week or whatever, 4 or 5 days, and then be done with it for another whatever amount of time to try to mitigate the noise for the neighbors and that kind of. We're doing everything we can, and just.
Except moving the operation to another site.
Except going away and going out of business.
That was what I was asking. Can he move that part of his business to another site, relieve the pressure? It seems to me he's outgrown the site.
No, he
No,
hasn't
because-
outgrown the site. I mean, the site's perfect for him. It's just.
Well, it's
what
perfect for
happened
him
is-
as long as he can work in the areas he's not supposed to be working in. So I'm saying, could he just subdivide his business and move it, take the pressure off this site, and set up the noisy, disturbing part of his business someplace else? A lot of people have several sites.
That's not an option, and I think that he's been working at the site, again, not to beat a dead horse, but well before the 2003 standards of the setbacks came into place.
Right,
So-
but maybe his business has outgrown the site. Has he considered that?
The other thing to bring up is that this still has to go before the planning board, because a lot of these activities were never permitted. This activity was never permitted by the planning board. The building inspector never gave a permit on the retaining wall. A lot of these activities have creeped, so the wetland encroachment has creeped, but also the activity. A lot of the noise complaints have started when the crusher came up. It sounds like there's a real ramping up of his business. So it has evolved over time. The planning board has no permit for this activity. You can't argue that. There was no
You know-
permit. Eventually, they're gonna have to go and ask for permission. And the neighbor's gonna say, this is not the right activity for this neighborhood, because it never had a permit. So if you don't have one, then the day you ask for it is, hey, we're starting now. We're discussing the noise level now. This might not be a great site for it.
You
That's
know-
a planning board issue that they'll deal with another time.
Mr. Chairman, that's not right for him to talk about what the planning board jurisdiction is. That's a site plan review is up to council that's handling that. I'm not handling that, somebody else is. But to interject that is not appropriate at this.
May I
at this
ask,
Trying to
are you
focus on the
going
wetland.
before the planning board?
Yes, well, they're
No,
talking
yes.
to the building
no.
inspector, but not, that, there's council, Mr. McCarthy's handling that with the building inspector. And
No,
there's been discussion in terms of whether or not that was approved previously and whether or not it needs a permit. So it has not been determined that one is required.
The comment keeps going back to, this was before the 2003 regulations. Well, before that, we had the act and commissions, and I was on a commission long before 2003. Hearings, the setbacks were determined on a case-by-case basis in every hearing. So regulations codified and made it easier, but setbacks certainly were established before 2003 all over the state. A commission would have a hearing and they'd say 75, 60, 52, whatever. They just weren't codified that you could look at. We had a 100-foot jurisdiction. We looked at a hearing and said, what's the commissioner's pleasure? And we voted 57 feet. The regulations basically codified those things so you could look at it in a table and say, that's what the setback is for this type of activity.
Right, and what the Andover case said was,
But they were trying to establish setbacks during a hearing. I understand that.
no. What the Andover case said was the commission cannot arbitrarily come up with those
They're never arbitrary.
setbacks.
They're based on what that commission felt the risk was to the resource area. I mean, it's been.
Okay. I'm just going to tell you that the law is very clear on that matter, is that commissions did not have that authority to set their own setbacks wherever they wanted to. It had to be in writing to give notice to applicants. Now, a lot of people didn't appeal them, but when anybody appealed a setback that was not in a bylaw or in a regulation, it was overturned. So you're right, lots of commission, I sat on my commission for 9 years, and we would set those, we'd establish where activities took place, and as long as they weren't appealed, we were fine.
No,
Again-
I think that, we can keep going back and forth in this kind of discussion,
So-
forever. I mean, we're just trying to find out if there's a way that we can coexist here, that you can get what you need, get your wetlands back.
I think
protect your
there is.
wetlands.
I think we just have to come up with that, and I feel it should be at least, it should be 50 feet. I'm willing to come in from 75 feet.
I mean,
I think
then we'll
the
just-
one thing we haven't talked about is the throat there in terms of,
You have like a little finger going out there.
right, having so that if you put 50, at 50 feet, it's right in it's in the middle of the yard, you can't drive a truck in there.
But again, the point was made that
be up here.
the plan, you would anticipate doing activity, within that resource area. I mean, that's why you want to have the wall where it is. So we're trying to minimize the actual truck activity and pile activity within that area.
Right, well, that whole area was cleared as of 1996, so
And
there was
activity.
no vegetation there was no cover, that was all a cleared site for purposes of this contractor's
I mean,
yard.
What you're doing, you're saying that this is the area that you can push on. You've got piles there. Move your piles.
Why
Make
can't the
more
piles come
room.
closer to the building? Why can't some
Yeah.
of those piles sitting in the middle
Those
of that finger
piles aren't
go toward the
static
building?
things.
I mean, I don't know. I'm looking at that site, and I'm looking like right north of the building there. What's there?
North of this building here?
Right.
Here?
No, right above it.
North.
Here?
Up.
No,
No,
that's
not-
west.
North is that way.
It's west. He's talking about west.
Okay, he's talking about west.
This
I
is,
think
this
he's
is a
talking
parking
about-
lot, with, you know, vehicles coming out of his garage doors here, they service, and his trucks get serviced, it's a parking lot.
But the piles
There's
can,
access.
the piles are movable. You're saying the only movable place on this property is the wetland. The piles can be rearranged.
So Carl,
Yeah.
to that point, the original plan, the 1996 plan,
They go again.
did show stockpiled material on site. It 100% did, as it should have. Those piles are to the left and below the existing building,
To the left,
and below,
below.
which isn't shown on the smaller plan. But if you look at this one, to the left and below, there's 3 piles, sand, they're showing material, sand stockpiled, right in that area, yes. In the driveway was
This says ledge.
above that a little bit. I'm talking,
Oh, material storage space.
And there is-
Yeah.
there's some stuff.
the original plan showed for that area to be for this contractor yard, that was supposed to be the storage area for bulk materials. They show a very narrow driveway coming in, just accessing the building. What's there now is a larger parking, much wider. So I have a 20-foot wide paved driveway that was approved. Now they're saying, well, that big turnaround area and the big parking area and accessing, they need it. But that was never approved. That was never shown in the beginning. So to Lilibet's point, that area to park they could move it over there.
Well,
move the
it,
piles.
I'm
This
not sure how
pile-
accurate the pile
You could put your
configuration
parking
is
lot
here,
up
but
there.
why can't
It's
this
narrow,
one
good
rubble
parking
pile
lot.
that seems to be in the way,
Let's take a look at,
yeah, why can't that one pile be moved somewhere?
that pile might not be there anymore.
Well, that's, again, that was my point. How accurate is this?
So it's making, those
But you
piles
said
are
that they
making
move
your-
around.
Yeah, I mean, you know, he gets a call from National Grid saying, you know, we had a big problem somewhere, we had a bunch of stuff coming into the site, and they're gonna move it on site, I mean, materials come off site, you know, it's an operation that's been around for a long time, it's, you know, it's serving a purpose, I mean, it's not a matter of just building a building and say we're gonna work inside the 4 walls of this building. It's not that kind of an operation.
I
and,
don't
you
think
know,
that's
I
what
mean,
you're
at the-
saying.
At the site walk, those piles are gargantuan.
Yeah.
They are huge, not only in terms of their breadth, but their height and the kinds of machinery he must need to work with those things must be gargantuan. And I really can see that he must need that space to work in. This looks very confined in here. He would have to, is this some kind of structure?
There's a little building there. You know,
Right,
yeah.
so this would have to
Open
come down,
storage.
you know, he's butting up against the neighboring property here. So and there's ledge here, I don't see that there's room in this area to conduct his business the way that there is out here.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that, Laura. It was more just referencing that the previous plan showed that there was stockpiled areas. I wasn't
Right.
saying let's put it there.
Okay.
Because it's not the
All
right
right.
spot for this activity.
Right.
I 100% agree, do not put
Okay.
it there.
All
It was
right.
more pointing out that if they're saying that this was approved and this is the plan all along, then why wasn't it shown? Because they showed stockpile before.
Right.
I do not think that's the right
So
spot
my
for now.
question is, it seems to me that if we ask him to move that wall back to 50 feet, that he will not be able to conduct his business. Would I be right?
Yeah,
Well, no, we'll conduct the
if you
business,
say
but
you
there
move
won't be a
50
wall.
feet, we're gonna say, okay, we won't have any, we'll put the wetlands back, we'll do the wetlands, like we promised we would, and we'll operate without a wall. We'll put a silt
Then what
fence
can
on.
we do if it goes back to the 50 there and there is no wall? Then what can we do to protect the site from the solvent runoff, the material runoff?
Well, the buffer could be enhanced. So the buffer, that 50-foot buffer, restore the wetland, and then
Could be a
the
headache
buffer
anyway.
could be mounded so
Right.
that it retains some of that flow.
Right.
There's no stormwater proposed yet. They will once we figure out where we're going with this.
Right.
So say you go back to the 50-foot, no cut, no disturb, no wall, then they remove all the fill needed, then you come off the 50-foot with a berm, and then it drops down. That berm would then
Just to be
protect the
clear,
wetlands.
Just to be clear.
So they can have, I'm sorry, may I just ask
ahead, I'm
him
sorry, go ahead,
one
sure.
more,
I'm sorry,
one
go
more
ahead.
thing? So instead of a wall, we could have some sort of vegetated berm that protects the siltation and still allows you to work Would I be right, without a wall, if we had some sort of vegetated,
Yeah, but we've already
but-
disturbed,
Area.
that area was disturbed prior to 2003, so you're not gonna get we're not gonna put a vegetated berm area in that, we're gonna use that just like it's been used since nineteen
What we're
ninety-six.
trying to say, and we're trying to say it as politely
Working
and
in the
as
no
respectfully as possible.
There was no
that
new disturb in 1996.
One conversation.
If we can't agree upon a location for a wall, we just can't come to agreement. You guys want 50, we want whatever, we just can't agree, we can't agree. Then our next proposal is gonna be, our position is gonna be, well, we'll restore the wetlands, because the wetlands have been filled, who did it, we did it, whoever did it, it has to be done, we gotta do it. But this area's been worked on going back way before 2003 regulations came into effect, and we're gonna continue to work that area, and if we could put a silt fence along the edge of the wetlands, or 5 feet off the wetlands, whatever we gotta do, we'll do it, and have to maintain it, it'll be a headache for us, it'll be a headache for you, and we think it's not the right way to do it. We think the right way to do it is we feel we have the right to work in that area, and we're willing to give up some of that area to put a barrier in that's gonna cost us a lot of money, that's gonna protect your wetlands, and gonna prevent our machine getting in there, and prevent a headache for us and a headache for you. Once it's all done, everyone's gonna be happy.
so.
The aerials do show that that's a disturbed
We're
area.
not,
They don't show a lot of detail, sir. I mean,
But the aerials show
we-
that that was a disturbed,
Even if it's
cleared
a
area.
disturbed area, it's still within the buffer.
Well, but you're saying
Right,
it's a
it
no
was-
disturb, but we had already disturbed it.
Fill was added though. The original grades support the, you know.
So, yeah,
Whatever.
okay, so
When they-
maybe
when they
we
pushed dirt
bring
back
it
and
back to
forth.
what its original grade
So
was
if-
by lowering it a couple of feet, but it's still a disturbed area.
We are running kind of late,
Yeah,
and
I mean,
I don't know.
We
if
are,
gonna
we
come to
go
some
round and
closure.
round. So I
I'd
have
like to
one
see,
more
I'd like to see you
question.
go back to your client and ask them if he's got any wiggle room in that wall.
Mr. Chairman, I'll do that, of course I'll do that. But I can tell you right now.
We came from a situation where he didn't even know he filed. He came in and said, somebody did it, I had no
Well-
idea that it was a file, and we've come a long way since then.
Right,
Yeah,
we have,
yeah.
exactly, I appreciate that, we have come a long way from then, and Chip and I spent hours with this guy yesterday doing this stuff. Maybe we can squeeze a few more feet here, but I'm telling you,
mean-
if we're talking 50 feet, I can just tell you right now, let's just not, we can't do that, let's not go there. let's
We
not waste our
told
time,
him
your
that
time.
if we could get to, 50 feet, we would get it, we'd
Right,
have it
Steve told us
approved.
that, he said, if you guys can do 50 feet, I think this will happen.
I think it would,
I
but,
think
can't do it.
you would. I think you're gonna be there.
and, so I'm saying that if he could, he would do that, but he can't do that.
Well, again, as I said, from my perspective, he came in here and said, I don't know anything about this. I have no idea how this happened. And next thing you know, he signed the NOIs, and I'm like, wait a minute, how are we getting from this? So we have come a long way. So we're
Yeah.
just saying, let's see if we can't take that last step and finish it off.
Well,
Look, we'll talk to him again, and we can come back again, have another session like this, and we can see if we can move that yellow line a little bit. But I want to be upfront with you.
yeah,
We're not gonna come in until it's 50 feet away, it's just.
It could move 5
can't do that.
feet,
Maybe
but
talking 5 or 10 feet. at
but it's not
max.
gonna.
I mean, you got to remember, this is an enforcement action. This is, it is a
understand.
negotiation to a point, but
We
we're,
don't wanna fight, no, we don't wanna fight with you guys, we
Right.
wanna work with you, but, my client's got a $1 million investment here, multi-million-dollar investment here, he's got a business,
well,
he's
running a
forced-
business, we all have to comply with the law. I do this for a living
understand, and we
too.
think- we
I'm a
think we have.
compliance guy. So, if I want to operate in the United States and Massachusetts, I got many laws I got to comply with.
Right.
And I can't just say, well, they're inconvenient. Yeah, a lot of them are.
Yeah, no, and we're trying to deal with your provisions and with the waiver provisions and with the setback.
We're trying to, not, I mean, from my perspective, I'm not trying to say everything's got to be 1996 back from the hearing. I think we are trying to compromise, but we're also trying to protect the resource as it is.
Right.
So we probably need to continue this to another, I mean, we don't have to vote continue it, but
No.
we can bring this up in the next meeting.
Yeah, it's not a
and-
hearing right now, so
Right.
you don't need to.
Yeah,
You
I
just
just
need
think
to.
we're going circular and
Yeah.
we're not gonna resolve anything.
Well, that's why I think they have to go back and have a little further discussion with the client to see what. I think we're there as far as say the restoration, and I think you're there like 75% of the way. I think you just need to figure out that last bit of this location of the wall.
What's your final offer?
Well, I'm just telling you, I'm gonna go back to Steve.
It's
Caruso.
not gonna move
Yeah,
significantly.
but I'm being upfront with you, you're not gonna come in and see this yellow line out here, we're just.
Well, I don't think if you drew a 50-foot, it's not out there. It's,
Oh, it is out there, I mean, if I
I'm
look.
I'm
50
looking
feet
here at the way
Show
you've got
where,
it drawn.
show where the
You're-
50
you're-
foot
You're
is.
telling me
It says
50.
50-foot buffer,
You're
right?
saying, no, but that 50 foot buffer you're saying, Mr. Chairman,
Is that from the
50 foot
existing?
That's from the existing wetlands
Right,
today.
right.
So if we're gonna replicate this wetlands and then be 50 feet away,
Restore.
restore this wetlands, we're gonna, thank you for that. Yeah, I can't forget that.
I do the same thing.
Um,
Too many
Well-
terms, too
Here's
many
50
terms
feet.
flying.
See that rubble pile?
Yeah.
That entire rubble pile is inside the 50-foot section. The word rubble, if we're gonna go 50 feet from the green line,
So you're out more like where it says about 75
Yeah,
on the
correct,
the
correct.
existing
it
one,
would be out to here.
or the tip of that
50,
one?
50 feet from that tip would come out to here. So you can imagine that line would go right across here. We're almost right on top of that pile. I mean, it's just not an option for us.
Well, I mean, this is kind of one of these things. If you were to come to a commission ahead of time and said, well, this is what we want to operate. I don't know if a commission would have approved it and said, yeah, go ahead and do this. I mean, this is kind of one of these after the fact things too.
So we're looking to continue it till the next meeting? Just
Are
with
we clear
guidance?
that what we're looking for, as you said, we're happy with everything except the placement of the wall?
Well, and
I
that's,
think we can.
that's pretty much
I would phrase it.
everything.
We can live with some of the other things.
Right,
I think it's the wall, but also the associated grade up to the wetland from the wall.
okay.
So you say the wall, I agree, but it's kind of, there's the next layer. If the wall's here, then there's much fill's being removed. I think the wall sets the grading, it answers the grading question.
Do you mean
yeah,
between the
and-
wall and the wetland? Okay, but
because
that's a detail
It is.
of the engineering.
And
so-
that's a fairly simple detail because that's
Right.
unusable area. So we'll
Right.
do whatever
Yeah, we'll do
works.
whatever.
Right,
That's
Okay, so that's fair. So it's really where the wall goes.
right.
Is what
That's
this is all
all,
about.
that's what we're down to.
Absolutely. The
And
grading
I
will
would-
follow.
I would just like to recognize that they have moved in our direction quite a bit. There was no talk before of restoring this back to the 96 wetland line, was there?
No.
It's relatively new
Okay.
information. The first meeting where we were discussing this, we didn't know
We
where the
didn't know
wetlands
where it
were.
was.
That's why we hired Jillian.
Exactly.
During the process of Jillian reviewing it, this plan was found that showed the 1996. So
No, we had this plan
it's,
before that.
yeah, it wasn't talked about at the meeting. There was a huge stack of paperwork. I didn't even know half of it was when this was first going on, and it's kind of evolved into time.
And since the beginning, they've been talking about replicating. We looked at that other
Right, so the
area
area here, and
down
I agree.
there,
Right.
and you've been offering replication ever since the beginning.
We did. We did.
We went
But we
around-
changed
went
to.
around the big trees,
We
went
went.
around
We
the
changed to
rock.
Exactly.
We changed to restoration.
Exactly. So I just feel like you have been coming
Well,
towards us in a
Thank you,
number
because
of
I think
different
from
ways.
where I started, I think we've come a long way, and I'm hoping that we can finish this off rather than.
But you do understand our position. We
No, I
have
do.
so many businesses in town, and we can't just have everyone coming to us saying, "Oh dear,
You're inconvenient.
you're going to
But I'm-
have to let me do this because I did it."
No, I agree,
I've been
but
in,
I
I've
bet
been in
you-
environmental health and safety compliance for almost 30 years. I have to deal with this kind of stuff all the time. And many regulations are inconvenient and they're a pain, but we have to somehow make them work.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't classify this as inconvenient, because you have a setback that you established of 75 feet, but you also established a process whereby you will consider changes to that. And so all we're doing is we're asking you
And
to
we-
consider that
And we are.
based upon what the impact is on the surrounding wetland.
And we're already down from 75 feet and counting. So, I mean, we are in that process right now. We're just not saying, like, let's go to, whatever, down to ground zero to right on the
Well, the
reserve.
burden is on us, under the waiver process, to prove to you that we're not gonna impact that wetland. That's on us, and you have to, then you use your discretion to either agree or not agree with us.
Let me just ask something while we're here, if I can. If I dare say this.
So we finish
But-
off.
Would there be any logic into maybe not restoring that little section of wetland right there, that little piece
The
that
little
points
nub
out?
that goes up there.
See my scale here, like I'm saying, if we did not restore that, and in lieu of that, just add some more over here, to, get the equal area
Is
over
that,
here.
is that gonna allow the wall to move more?
Well, that will
Well,
create a false
it'll
sense
create-
of
it'll
buffer,
create-
but
it'll
it'll
create
give you a 40-foot
A false
buffer
sense. Thank
instead
you,
of.
Steve, I appreciate that.
No, but it is. But I mean,
I'm
you know
just
what I'm
trying to
saying.
find, Steve, I'm trying to find ways to help here, we're not.
No,
keep up on roadblocks.
I'm actually agreeing with you. I'm saying it's creating a buffer.
Could've fooled me.
It's
No,
creating a
he-
larger buffer than what is shown right now.
I'm trying to create a larger buffer, so if we end up moving
With
the
the
wall,
same
let's
amount
say
of
5 or
wetland.
10 feet,
Right.
and we get another 10 feet over here, now we've got 20 feet, you know what I'm saying? I'm just trying to.
I would entertain,
What do you think?
pulling that jog in a little bit, and again, that would allow a greater buffer, in my opinion, of the wall to that, if
The-
you
the-
let in, and.
What was the original, placement of the buffer was probably a topo line, is that right?
Well, off of the
About-
96 plan is the black line.
1996, I think it was, you know the name of the firm there.
Hancock.
Hancock did a plan, and they showed wetland signs. They had wetland signs on staff. Now, in 1996, it's interesting, that's right when the wetlands laws were changing from just vegetation to vegetation and soil. So we don't know to this day if it was just on vegetation, which tends to be a little bit more aggressive in some cases. In particular, matter of fact, Maureen from North Environmental said the particular plant that was grown here is a plant that tends to creep into the uplands, not necessarily wetland plants. Be it as it may, that line was flagged and surveyed by them, so we were able to put that line on this plan, because we have a plan the same scale, we put it right on the plan. So that's how that line got established. What I'm trying to say is that, I'm being honest with you, that I'm talking to Steve yesterday, we're not gonna move this wall 20 or 30 feet, it's just not gonna, we're not gonna post it, but if we propose it like another 5 or 10 feet, whatever we can get out of them, and also maybe cut this area off, we'll have a bigger buffer to the restored wetland, we can add some more wetlands over here. It might be just, I'm trying to find some common ground,
I think making the edge of the wetland, I think that is a good idea. I think the reason I ask about the topo line, it really depends on the elevation
Well,
change
topo's all
on the
changed
property,
now, so
what
if you-
makes sense.
Yeah, topo
No, I
now
mean,
is
but I
total
mean, how you come to, you're gonna be digging, you're gonna be creating a new, boundary between the upland that you're using and the
Yes.
wetland.
Yes.
And if it doesn't make sense in the topo of the whole property, then, you're creating more space, but I think otherwise, it's a good idea.
What we would do is, with the restored wetlands ends, that's gonna be at the same grade the wetlands now, which is roughly around 70.5.
Right, but how it hits.
Then we're gonna slope up,
Okay.
and we'll slope up no more than, probably I'd like to keep like a 3-to-1 if I could. 3-to-1's a good slope, it's, steep
As-
enough to get a grade, but
As you're
not so
making,
steep to
as you're
erode.
making the grade up,
Well-
instead of making a smooth grade, make it with swales.
But that's an
That's-
engineering,
Yeah, we can-
that's an
but that's pretty
engineering
We can do
thing
that
for
stuff,
later.
plantings
But
and-
I was trying actually to get to another topic, and not confrontational at all, but, I mean, you have a huge parking lot over there, and you have this really narrow space. Has he considered, the owner, the operator of this operation that's been there since 1996, has he considered making, maybe, it might be a lot cheaper for him, make a parking lot in the narrow area, and that big wide open area be one of your pile areas? It would be a big change in the way he does his operation, but it would alleviate a lot of the issues, because it's that narrow part of your property that would be an ideal parking lot possibly, and you could move a pile over to the upland flat part that nobody's gonna tell him what to do. I mean, just think,
I
I'm
can
just
discuss-
saying,
I can
ask him
discuss
to
that
think
with him.
about it.
It's kind of an alternative design, which is.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
I would-
mean,
I would-
everybody's
Problem with
thinking
tree
about it
line
the
and
way
the
it
way
is
it's
now.
right.
I would beg to
Maybe he
differ
could
that not a lot of planning initially
reorganize.
went into where these piles went, they just kind of happened over the years based on the business.
I think
And
based
everybody's
upon,
used
agree with that.
to
you,
it.
I
you
think I
you
know-
don't,
know
you don't wanna
someone's
put that in the
business.
middle of the site, because with a crushing operation, then you use the advantage of your screening and your
Yeah,
tree
but what I'm
line.
saying is nobody laid out a site plan and said, okay, pile number 1 is gonna be here, these are where the pile, I think they just kind of,
Let me just say this before I forget, because I did want to get this in there for what it's worth. The first time I went to the site, and this is the God's honest truth, I saw Steve Cruson talking about it. I said, Steve, I got to tell you one thing. I've been on a lot of sites like this. I've been in this business for over 30 years, and this is a really neat site. And I mean, like neat as a pin. It's for a site that's it's not paved out here. I mean, it's just there's no runoff anyway. He has the little sprinklers going to keep the dust down all the time, and it's a very well organized. His garage is neat. You can eat off the floor of his garage. It's a very neat organization, very neat site. He does a great job. So I'm not going to judge him as to how he conducts his business. I think he knows how to conduct his business. He does a real good job at it.
But
I'll talk to him.
you do something for 26 years, and you have habits, and it's hard to take a look from somebody else's perspective. If you ask him, I mean, maybe that would work.
I will discuss.
Probably just
I'm
hasn't
going to
thought
discuss
about it.
everything with him.
Absolutely.
We're going to express to him all I've heard tonight. That we're going to try to get this wall as far away as we possibly can. The commission's looking for 50 feet. I'll explain all that stuff. I'm just being upfront with you. I know from talking to him yesterday that 50 feet is not going to. I'm not going to come in with that. And to your point that you said earlier, I mean, I bet there are a number of businesses in town that have work, existing things within buffer zones and stuff, just the way it is, I mean.
This,
it's the way
this
it
is a little,
been.
this is a little
We're trying to
unusual
improve,
because
it is, we're trying to
this
improve
is
upon
an,
it.
this is an enforcement action and we're negotiating, and usually it doesn't happen that way. If you've been in this
Right.
business, you know that. I mean,
Well-
usually a commission will dictate, this is what we want, if you wanna sue us, whatever, this is the EO. We're trying to negotiate, so I mean, but your client also needs to understand that this is not just an NOI process, that it's just,
I understand.
I don't feel like doing that.
Yeah, well, we're way past that. I think
I
if
know
that
that.
was
He-
the,
he's
I know
very
that.
Yeah,
cooperative, you know,
And that's,
there are limits.
right.
And I'm not talking about other people who might be doing the same. I'm talking about people in the future who might be deciding, well, they got away with it.
Well, the futures, is a different story. It's
Well,
not- it's
that's
not-
part of our
Well,
thinking.
Sure, we
You
have to
know,
deal with that
we
all the
are-
time.
That's
Yeah,
part
if
of
this-
our thinking.
if this is getting away with something, then that's, yeah,
You haven't seen our bills.
yeah,
So-
yeah, I know.
So we
Well,
are, yeah, we are getting a little late, so
All
I
right.
think, you have some, direction at least from the commission, and, we need to
We
kind
do
of,
appreciate,
We'll come back
taking
in-
the time and.
we'll come back in
we'll
March.
Do the best we can, we'll come
When,
back.
when
What's
do
the
you,
dates?
when do you meet
March?
Steve?
March 19th.
March 19th, no, March 19th.
So
Is there gonna
we
be a
can't really
time
give
or
you a
just a-
time specific.
Well, because it's not a hearing.
Exactly. But we have a hearing at 7:40.
I think we got everything from 7:15 to
Yeah,
7.
7 o'clock to 7:40. When it gets closer, we can chat or email back and forth, and if I have a couple of things that get knocked off early, we can get you one early. But at this point, 7:40 is the last meeting.
All right.
So it'd be sometime a little bit before 8 o'clock, probably.
Correct.
Okay. Well, this was, while sometimes it gets contentious, this was very helpful to us. I hope, and I think it's reflected that you see that we have been trying to
We have come a long way.
take some steps.
As I
and
said,
so we-
initially came in, it was like, I don't know what you're talking about, I didn't do any of this, I didn't sign any paperwork, and now it's like, oh, yeah, well, okay, I
Oh,
did
that
have
is
an
my
LOI.
signature.
Well,
If there are any plans.
We do
perhaps,
operate
we
this
can get
place,
into
and,
the meeting, just so
we're trying
that
to
the
fix
commission has a
things.
chance to look it over. It's just helpful.
I think we'll do what we did before, which is if we have some changes, we'll come see you beforehand, so.
Okay, sounds good.
That usually works out best.
I think it's, Steve has been very accommodating,
I
and
I tell applicants to do that, to have discussions with the agent beforehand and not, hash some things out.
Yeah, no,
on a preliminary basis.
If you guys, I wouldn't go out back, leave the building from the front, because they're removing ice off the back of the building.
yeah, no, I had to move my car to,
Just make sure you don't sneak out the back.
yeah, we'll be like the people in Cambridge.
Exactly.
Yes,
Thank you for coming in.
I'm kind of time sensitive, so I don't have a lot of time, I gotta get home.
We took care of all of our business issues as we had time during the night, so we're actually all set. Just need to close the meeting.
I'll entertain a motion to close.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion to close the meeting.
I second it.
We have a motion, it's been seconded to close the meeting. Any further discussion?
Thanks again.
In favor?
Thank you.
You're welcome. All in favor? Aye. All
Aye.
opposed, all abstaining.
You parked up back.
Motion- Meeting is closed. Good evening.
Have a love.